Carolina.
Yeah, we're already seeing some results in the presidential race from two states because some of their polls closed at 6 p.m. In the reliably red state of Indiana, Donald Trump is leading there by 91,000 votes. He's got 61% of the vote over Vice President Kamala Harris.
We are also seeing results from Kentucky, another state former President Trump is expected to win easily. Right now, 71% of the vote there to Kamala Harris is 28%.
And all night, this is what we're going to be tracking. The race to 270. That's the number of Electoral College votes a candidate needs to win the presidency.
As states are called, we will be filling in this map for you and tracking that tally.
And hello, everyone. After a presidential campaign that really can feel like it lasted several years and really just shook up dramatically over the summer, we are finally here on Election Night 2024.
Whew, though this may turn into election week, we'll explain that in a moment. Tonight, votes will be counted and we will start to learn about at least some of the decisions you have made about the future of our government. We have a team of reporters around our area and the state tracking key races and that vote counting process.
And as we watch the results come in, we're going to be breaking things down with our roundtable of esteemed guests. News4JAX political analyst and Shercliffe executive director of the Jacksonville University Public Policy Institute, Rick Mullaney, our friend, is here. Also joined by government law attorney and author Chris Hand, former chief of staff for the city of Jacksonville and staffer for the late Senator and Governor Bob Grant.
Also, pastor and political contributor John Newman, and I have the honor of introducing joining us for his 16th presidential election, longtime News4JAX anchor Tom Wills, who just stepped away from the anchor desk this past May. Yeah, Tom, thanks for joining us. That's awesome.
It's wonderful to be here with you, going all the way back to 1964 when I covered my first presidential election, Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson. And the contribution I have to make is every single one of our presidential elections makes history, but this one is going to make some extra history because no matter which one of these candidates wins, is going into the history books because former President Trump is trying to become only the second president in our history to win a second non-consecutive term. Grover Cleveland did it way back in 1892, nobody else. So that would be one bit of history if he won. And of course, the other bit of history would be if Kamala Harris wins, the vice president. She would become the first woman president, as well as the first woman of color to be in the Oval Office. So no matter when this ends, whether it's in a matter of hours or a matter of days, history will be made. And you know, to some degree, history is repeating itself. Way back in 1968, the incumbent president, Lyndon Johnson, stepped aside. Yeah. His party's vice president, his vice president, their parties became their party's candidate. The Republican candidate overcame incredible odds, came from political no man's land to win the Republican nomination and eventually to go on to win the White House. And as everybody who read any history knows, that presidency made incredible history because he's the only president to resign from office. So we stand back and we wait. But I have to say this. Turmoil, a lot of people are concerned about turmoil. I've witnessed a lot of turmoil in my lifetime. The country has survived that turmoil. It will survive this turmoil, too.
All right.
That's my 2 cents worth.
Great perspective. We're going to get all night.
The opening round of perspective there, Tom. Thank you.
Calm down, everybody.
Okay.
What else are we looking for tonight? Gentlemen, let's start with you, John. What are you looking for specifically tonight?
I'm looking for the surrounding counties in Philadelphia, Bucks, Delaware, Montgomery. Looking for the surrounding counties in Detroit, Macomb, the suburbs, Bloomfield Hills with Bloomfield Township. I'm looking at those in terms of what's happening for the get out the vote for the Democrats, as well as Pittsburgh as well. Allegheny County was surrounding them as well. To see what the turnout's going to be.
Chris, give us your first look, or what we're looking for tonight, in your opinion.
The three most important letters, consecutive letters in American politics, are NPA, no party affiliation. Those voters are going to decide this election tonight. People who aren't registered Democrats or Republicans in all of these swing states, NPA voters particularly pivotal in deciding who the next president's going to be. That's number one. Number two, early, going to be looking at the results from the state of Georgia and the state of North Carolina. Those are the two swing states that will report their results the quickest. That may give us a very early read on how quickly or how long the vote count's going to take.
All right. You're left, Rick.
Yeah, near term, I agree with Chris. Early in the evening, what we're looking for is Georgia, which by 70 to 75% of their vote will be reported early, 8 to 9 p.m. And before midnight, North Carolina. These are really must-win states for Donald Trump. But bigger picture, let's keep it really simple. For Kamala Harris, if she wins Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, she's the next president of the United States. That's the blue wall. And remember this, Donald Trump has to win one of those 3 states if he wants to be president. So what are we really looking at? It's Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. It's 19 of the electoral votes of those 93 from the 7 swing states. So big picture, it's that big blue wall in Pennsylvania. Near term, early in the evening, I agree with Chris, it's Georgia and North Carolina. And Donald Trump needs to hold serve in both of those. Historically Republican, but in recent years, you saw certainly Georgia go to Joe Biden back in 2020 by just under 12,000 votes. North Carolina in the last 11 elections has only gone for the Democrat one time. That was in 2008, but it is very much in play. So keep your eyes focused on Georgia and North Carolina. But in terms of the outcome of this election, it's the big blue wall.
Just getting started with our roundtable. Thank you, Rick and John and Chris and Tom. And so throughout the night, when states are called, you'll see an election alert just like that. The state of Indiana is being called already for the Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump. The 11 electoral votes go to him from the state of Indiana.
Also, we are hearing from the state of Kentucky. Oh, let's take a look at the closer numbers. Indiana, looking at Donald Trump's 61% there. We're talking about a difference of 108,000 votes here. So the next state to be called tonight by the Associated Press, Kentucky, Donald Trump is the projected winner. Those 8 electoral votes will go to him.
Yeah, and if you look at the numbers here, this is what's being reported at this point. A difference of 70,000 votes there, but that leaves Donald Trump with more than 70% of the votes at this point from the state of Kentucky.
Now let's take a look at the state of Vermont. The Associated Press calling this for Kamala Harris. Take a look. 3 electoral votes are going to her. But let's take a closer look at the numbers. Oh, we don't have those.
Yeah, the numbers on the big electoral college map that we're watching tonight. 270 to win. And after these first 3 states are reporting, 3 votes for Vice President Harris, 19 so far for President Trump. Again, a long way to go. And we've been watching those key states. The yellow highlighted states, so those are the 7 swing states that we'll really be focused on tonight as well.
All right, the general election in a presidential year, it's often the outliner when it comes to voter turnout.
Yeah, and while many of our recent elections have left officials wishing that more people would exercise their right to vote, recent presidential elections have had turnout that was really high. In Duval County, more than half of registered voters voted early one way or another. Election day turnout slowed somewhat.
News4JAX anchor and reporter Ashley Harding joining us live from the Duval County Election Center on the north side, where, Ashley, tabulations, the process is already underway.
It certainly is. And, you know, you guys, I heard it described as kind of like a gender reveal. You're on the edge of your seat wanting to see what's going on here. So this is a look at it right here. You see, this is the tabulation room, and it looks just like that. In the back there, you see Councilman Michael Boylan. He is, of course, on the canvassing board. But the man of the hour, though, this is Jerry Holland, Duval County Supervisor of Elections. You've got something in your hand. Are you able to share with us how things look right now?
Sure. We've already put these results out on our website. Basically, this will be about 70% of the voters who have participated in this election. We still have about 115,000 votes that will still come in from the precincts.
Are you able to share any results at this moment?
This is where we're at right now. Of course, I'll let you look at it. Obviously, where the races are right now, Harris leading 175,000, 172,000, as well as, you know, on the Senate race, the Democrat leading over Scott, 170 to 69. So right now what you're seeing is, again, the results of the who's turned out so far and the early and the vote by mail.
As I say, we also took a look at this a moment ago. The big things right now, in addition to the presidential election, are those constitutional amendments. As of now, it looks like only one, at least in Duval County, has hit 60%.
It looks like maybe 2. One is the one on hunting and fishing in Duval has exceeded the 60%, and the other one is on the inflationary mark, you know, that will due to the homestead exemption. So those two right now are trending above 60%. But again, it's a statewide vote, so it's no telling how the rest of the 66 counties have done.
Tell us what your staff is doing right now. I was talking to this young lady over here. She's been here since 5 in the morning, and I know it's like that for you. What's happening right now?
Well, we've got a long ways before we go home today. Basically, obviously, putting the results out, getting all the results in from the precincts, and then also, our end of the day, we've got to get everything back that we can reconstruct the election. The ballots back in, the thumb drives, the result tapes, everything that we need in case for any reason we have to do a recount. We want to know they are here in our building tonight.
All right. And what was the final voter turnout in Duval County? You told me it didn't quite reach what you were hoping.
You know, every SOE is always optimistic. We were hoping around 77%. It looks like we're going to be somewhere between 73 and 74%, which was really about the same as it was in 2020.
Okay. All right, Jerry Holland, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Still lots going on here. I'll give you one other look here. God, those guys are still behind those computers just looking at everything. So, you know, the process isn't quite over here, but Jerry just did give us a snippet of how things look as of right now. But it does go to show you people came out and did vote in this election. We're going to stay here for a little while, keep you guys posted. I'll send it back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Ashley. And as we said, polls have also just closed in Georgia. That's one of the states that we were going to be watching very closely tonight.
As we mentioned earlier, voting was extended at a few precincts in Fulton County. That's where Atlanta is. The precincts received bomb threats, which investigators said were not credible, but voting had to be stopped for anywhere between 10 to 45 minutes. Voting was extended depending on the amount of each time the precinct had to be closed. Joining us now from Southeast Georgia is News4JAX reporter Ariel Schiller. She is at the Glenn County Supervisor of Elections office. Ariel?
Actually, Joy, I'm outside a precinct at College Place United Methodist Church. About 12 minutes ago, 13 minutes ago now, a poll worker came out and said polls are closed and locked the door, so they around the precinct right now. But I'm very surprised that we didn't see a line out the door when I worked in Middle Georgia for 2 election days. Usually we would see lines out the door at 7 o'clock, but it seems like maybe because of early voting that maybe that people voted during early voting instead of voting on election day. But we're also seeing, though, is law enforcement on property too. We've seen that at multiple different precincts today. Not sure if that's related to what happened in Fulton County today, but we will check in with the Supervisor of Elections or the Board of Elections to see if that's related to what happened in Fulton County earlier today. But we did see a steady stream of people at several different precincts around the area of Brunswick. Many people saying it took 5 to 7 minutes to vote today. All of them saying that they wanted to make sure their voice was heard. So, of course, we're going to go and check in with another precinct, see if there's a line past 7 o'clock, and we'll let you know as things develop. Reporting live in Brunswick, Ariel Schiller, Channel 4, the local station.
Thank you, Ariel. And throughout the night, we're going to be digging deeper into some of the results to try and understand how different communities have voted.
We'll be going county by county around Florida and in key states around the country. John Acebis is here with a look at what he's going to be showing us throughout the night. John?
Yeah, I was interested to see what kind of results we'd be seeing this early into the night, and it looks like Florida's already checking in 42% of the votes and 42% of the precincts checking in right now. Donald Trump with a 240,000 vote lead over Kamala Harris at 52% of the votes. That's already 4.7 million. A lot of those, obviously, a lot of folks voted early. But what we're going to do throughout the night is take a look at the map. And with the heat map, we can take the temperature and show you the margin of how folks are voting. We'll spend a lot of time in Northeast Florida here. One of the ones that I am particularly looking at is Duval County. Historically, that flipped in 2020, and it certainly was interesting. Right now, Harris has a 50% edge, but the benefit of this interactive map is I can side by side show you what we see in 2024 and what we saw in 2020. We will be relying on that tool throughout the night just to take a gauge on what Florida thought of the last presidency and how we are doing moving forward. Not to mention the all-important state of Georgia. One of the things that I'm keeping my eyes on tonight is there are far fewer mail-in ballots. So we're going to know a lot about Georgia early in the night, I do believe, and you're already seeing some of the colors pop up on our heat map. We're going to spend a lot of time here in Fulton County, the Atlanta area, and as Mr. Newman was saying, the suburbs around Atlanta and some of these metro areas. That is going to be largely important for both of these candidates, and of course, we'll pull up the 2020 election results and see who improved or who gained some grounds in certain areas. areas. So lots to go over tonight, and no less important are the amendments and our U.S. Senate race here in the state of Florida. We've got Rick Scott, Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. We'll take a look back at 2018 when Rick Scott really edged out versus Ben Nelson in the 2018 U.S. Senate race. We'll see tonight if Rick Scott can maintain his lead. He's already getting out ahead here in Florida, but it's an early night. We'll keep our eyes closely on that, as well as two very important amendments, what we are seeing right now. So far, legalizing marijuana, we've got 56% voting yes, but that could change throughout the evening. We're seeing a lot of that shaded green right there through the I-4 corridor. I'll keep my eyes on that, as well as a very green Duval County right now, but again, very early. And of course, we'll take a look at Amendment 4 when it comes to right to abortion. So lots to unpack tonight, guys, as we get those numbers.
Great stuff. John, thanks. Well, along with breaking down votes county by county, we're also going to get some insight tonight into how different issues and backgrounds factored into the choices voters made.
Tarek Miner and Scott Johnson will be bringing us that through the AP VoteCast survey data. Tarek and Scott.
This is a lot of interesting data. AP VoteCast, it is a nationwide survey conducted by the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago. But it's not like traditional exit polls, which would only talk to voters on Election Day.
Now, with more and more people voting before Election Day, researchers are turning to phone and online interviews, finding out who people voted for president and other key races like the U.S. Senate, asking questions about issues as well as their backgrounds. So I want to put this first slide on the screen, if we could there. I want to talk to you about the most important issues. This is what Florida voters had to say. 40% economy and jobs, 22% immigration, 10% abortion. I want to stop right there for a second. In 2020, that number was a lot lower. Abortion is more on the people's minds. Keep in mind, we have Amendment 4 we're discussing in Florida, so abortion more important to voters right now. 6% on climate change, and then 3% on foreign policy. Kind of surprising with a lot of the things that have been going on internationally.
And our next slide here from AP VoteCast is the most important issue for voters in Georgia. There you see the economy and jobs at 44%, immigration 18%, abortion 11%, almost mirroring Florida's results, climate change at 4%. And for the folks in Georgia, foreign policy only accounting for 3% of their votes as far as the most important issue.
And now let's get to Amendment 4. So this was national, this was Florida numbers on whether or not marijuana should be legalized federally, which it's not. Obviously, there's a distinction. In Florida, we're voting on an amendment for Florida. But this is how Florida voters felt on the issue of marijuana. 54% thought the issue was very important. Excuse me, is this Amendment 4? This is abortion. I'm sorry, correct. We were on a different slide. I apologize. So this is Amendment 4 on abortion. Let's clarify here. So 54%, more than half of voters say this is very important to them. 29% somewhat important, 11% not too important, 5% not at all, but still more than half saying this is important, meaning Amendment 4, the abortion amendment, will be high on a lot of voters' minds.
And now here are Florida voters on abortion and whether or not they believe it should be legal in all or most cases. 64% saying yes, and 35% saying it should be illegal in all or most cases. All of this information is interesting because it can really, begin to tell us what the rest of the nation is speaking and thinking as well as we go through the election night. We are going to be taking a look at this next one. Scott?
Yeah, this next one is on marijuana. So marijuana, Florida voters, because this is the other thing. This is Amendment 3. I got it out of order. I apologize. But this is Amendment 3 on marijuana. 35%, that's the biggest number we see, strongly favor the legalization of it. 23% somewhat favor it. So that's, more than 50. But keep in mind, Amendment 4 needs 60% to pass. So 17% somewhat oppose. 23% strongly opposed. So this one's going to be a very big borderline, Tarek, on whether or not it passes because it needs 60% approval to pass.
Yeah, we know that the governor has been against it. There's been a lot of discussion about the pros and the cons, and now it is up to the people. And I think we have one more slide, or if not, we've got a lot more information coming in. Yeah, it's coming into our newsroom. We're going to be taking a look at different questions throughout the course of the night on how the electorate voted and what pushed them to the polls.
And as the night goes on, we will have more data from more voters giving us a better picture of the electorate. Kent, we're going to send it back to you.
Scott Tarek, thank you. So tonight there are 7 states that are going to be in the spotlight. They hold the key to who the next president will be.
These are the 7 battleground states where the race is just too close right now to really have a handle on the likely outcome. They include our neighbors in Georgia, as well as Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
And some of those states may have us waiting a little while to know the final outcome. Here's a look at why. We're starting Pennsylvania because by law, election workers can't start to process mail-in ballots until 7 a.m. on Election Day. So that means the complete count can take several days, as it did in 2020. In Nevada, as long as the mail-in ballots are postmarked by Election Day, they can be received up to 4 days later. So if it's a very close race, then we could be waiting for that outcome too. And in Arizona, mail-in ballots that are dropped off on Election Day, those are not processed until after the polls close.
If you voted, you no doubt know there was so much more on your ballot beyond just the race for president.
Yeah, and we may not be able to talk about every race on your ballot during our coverage tonight, but you're going to find results for many of them scrolling across the bottom of your screen as the numbers come in. And we're going to have all the results on News4JAX.com. Here's a look, though, at some of what we're watching closely tonight. We have Florida's U.S. Senate race between the incumbent Republican Rick Scott and his Democratic challenger Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. We'll also be tracking the battle for the U.S. Senate as a whole, as well as the balance of power in the U.S. House. Stacey Spanos will join us in a little bit with a look at that.
There are also 6 amendments on the ballot for Florida voters, as we mentioned, including the hot button issues of Amendment 3 for recreational marijuana and Amendment 4 on abortion access. And we'll talk about some of the local races you voted on, including 2 referendums for school funding in St. Johns County, as well as the sheriff's race in Clay County.
Now, we are seeing some results in Florida for those 2 highest profile amendments. Amendment 3, legalizing recreational marijuana. This is what's happening so far. At this point, 49% reporting. It's 55 saying yes, 55% saying yes, 45% no. As Scott just pointed out, any of these amendments need 60% to pass.
That's right. Let's take a look also at Amendment 4. And there we are taking a look at the question regarding abortion access right now. 58% have voted yes, 42% voting no, but again, just half reporting right now. Half of the votes are in.
Yeah, so
nobody's watching this more closely than Governor DeSantis, who campaigned against both of these amendments and wants them both to go down to defeat, even though we still have a lot of votes to count. And historically, South Florida's ballots have not come in yet.
Yeah, so let's talk about those issues. What we were saying is that, yeah, how it goes with those 2 issues maybe reflects something on the national direction. Let's just look at Florida. What do you think it says that Florida voters at this point not quite to that threshold to say yes on changing the Constitution?
Well, it is just so early. There's so much danger in trying to interpret early results in these elections. Amendment 4, which would restore the right to reproductive choice in the Florida Constitution, is very close to the threshold. It's about 58% right now. So I think it's going to be really important here to make sure all the votes come in, because these could be decisions that are made by 60.1% of the vote based on how narrow the margins are right now.
Well, Rick,
so be patient.
Exactly. I think that's what we have to do.
And Tom brought up a great point, talking about Governor DeSantis. How unusual is it for a governor to get involved, so involved in amendments?
It's different and it's significant, and part of it is take a look at what's happened nationally. You've seen 24 other states legalize marijuana. Whenever you've seen abortion on the ballot in other states, they've been passing, even in red states, all throughout the country. What Tom has pointed out is that the organized opposition and the opposition from Governor DeSantis is one of the reasons, even though I agree with Chris, it's early, but 50% of the vote counting is why it's so close, because it was projected early in the polling that both of these would pass. It's become much more competitive in trying to get past that 60% threshold, and I attribute quite a bit of that to the organized opposition to Amendment 3 and the organized amendment to Amendment 4. And quite frankly, if they were to fail in Florida, and this is way too early to say that, but if it did, Florida would be a little bit of an outlier compared to some national trends.
So John, yeah, chime in on this. Yeah. And what I'm thinking of is, as we're talking about the governor saying, I want voters to vote like this, he really did say that. That's the Republican leader in the state, but I've been hearing Republicans saying, oh, I might vote this way in races, but on those issues, on the amendments, it's not quite as partisan.
Well, I think that part of it would be, in terms of the outcome, that Rick alluded to, as well as Chris, is that the messaging. and whether the misrepresentations broke through. Amendment 3, the misrepresentation is that they can just smoke marijuana anywhere, where they're leaving out the fact that each local jurisdiction can place restrictions on certain things as to where it can be used. And Amendment 4, there's this propaganda, well, I'm sorry, it's a strong word, isn't it? There is this messaging that suggests that there's no parental notification when it's already been codified into law, so it would not stop parental notification. But if the messaging breaks through, that could impact what the results are tonight.
Yeah.
The commercials. I mean, in every commercial break, you had pro and con on both of these amendments. That's 4 commercials.
Well, Ken, I would like to go to your point a little bit about less partisan, because one of the interesting aspects here in Florida is the difference between Governor DeSantis and Donald Trump. On Amendment 3, you have DeSantis, of course, opposed, but you have Donald Trump saying he's supporting it. Why? Because Donald Trump is doing something I mentioned earlier. He's looking at the national election. He's looking at his election. And nationally, that is more popular. There is a difference between the two. And on Amendment 4, although Donald Trump came back to opposition, for a long time, he has been trying to find his footing on that issue. As we get into the evening and we talk about the issues that are driving the presidential race, clearly women's reproductive rights and the abortion issue has been an advantage to Kamala Harris. Donald Trump knows that. And so one of the interesting things on these 2 amendments is look at the difference in position between the governor and Donald Trump.
Kerry-esque. I was for it before I was against it.
Well, and just if we have time, just one very important point about amendments 3 and 4. Of course, no, thank you. Remember that part of the governor's opposition and the state's opposition to this was taxpayer-funded opposition. That's been one of the big controversies of this election, that tens of millions of dollars of state funding have gone into opposing Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, and state efforts to try and stop Amendment 4 advertising. That's been very controversial, so controversial that a federal judge enjoined that practice during the campaign.
Yeah, it is something a lot of people nationally are talking about what's going on there.
All right, folks, we are fired up and ready to go all night. Stay with us. Thanks so much for staying with us through our election coverage.
This is when the polls have just closed in North Carolina, in Ohio, and in West Virginia.
We are starting to see results in some of our U.S. House races around Northeast Florida.
Now let's take you through some of those. We're going to start with District 3. This includes Baker, Columbia, Bradford, Union, and Alachua counties, as well as some others in north central Florida. Checking out the results, incumbent Republican Kat Cammack. She's seeking her third term, and she's facing a challenge from Democrat Tom Wells. Wells has run for the seat since 2016, and Cammack in control at this point, 48% reporting, and she's got 56% of the vote.
Florida's 4th district includes Nassau and Clay counties and the part of Duval County that's north and west of the St. Johns River. Take a look at the results. Republican Aaron Bean is seeking his second term, facing Democrat LaShonda L.J. Holloway, who he defeated 2 years ago to win his first term in Congress. With 77% of the vote in, it looks like Aaron Bean right now has the edge, 57% over L.J.'s 43% of the vote.
District 5, this includes the rest of Duval County and nearly all of the area south and east of the river, and then the upper half of St. Johns County down to the St. Augustine area. Former Jacksonville Sheriff and Republican John Rutherford. He's won his 5th term in Congress. The Associated Press calling this race just a few moments ago. He has defeated Democrat Jay McGovern. Congressman Rutherford with 62% of the vote tonight.
And now take a look at House District 6. It includes the rest of St. Johns County, plus Putnam and Flagler counties and other counties heading towards central Florida. Taking a look, Republican Michael Waltz is seeking his 4th term on Capitol Hill. He faces a challenge from Democrat James Stockton III, a pastor in Ocala. Not much of a challenge at 70% of the vote reporting. Michael Waltz seeing 65% to James Stockton's 35%.
And tonight, Florida voters will elect one of their representatives for the other side of Capitol Hill, the United States Senate.
Former Republican Governor Rick Scott seeking his second 6-year term in Washington. His main challenger is Democrat Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, a former member of Congress from South Florida. Take a look at these numbers. 64% of the vote in. It looks like Scott is ahead right now. You see we have crews with both campaigns at their election night events. We start with News4JAX reporter Ann Maxwell at the Scott campaign event in Bonita Springs in Southwest Florida. Ann, how's the mood?
Hey, Joy, it's upbeat, and I will say the energy has really gotten more intense in this past half hour or so as results have begun to be projected on the big screens behind me. There are hundreds of people here mingling, watching the results come in, having a glass of wine or two. A lot of energy here in the room. A campaign aide tells me more than 300 people have RSVP'd for this event. He said he is relieved. It is election day. He said the senator has been campaigning hard across the Sunshine State for weeks. Just today, he went to Jacksonville, Tampa, and Orlando, making his pitch to voters to send him back to Washington for another 6 years. This comes on top of his 2 terms as governor here in Florida. Right now, he's trying to pitch he's been pitching the message of Rescue America. That is the name of his 12-point plan. We've got people here cheering. Oh, Florida Senate. Scott is up. Everybody here in the room cheering for that. Looks like they've moved on since now. Senator Scott is pitching a smaller federal government. He is looking to make the Trump tax cuts permanent, build a wall at the border and name it after former President Trump. Also looking to limit abortion. I'm told the senator is with his family now after that long day of traveling and campaigning, but he is going to be coming out and speaking when the race is called. For now, reporting live in Bonita Springs, Ann Maxwell, Channel 4, the local station.
All righty, Ann, thank you. On the Democratic side, former Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell earned the chance to challenge Scott after winning her party's primary back in August.
Yeah, News4JAX reporter Tiffany Salome is joining us now live from that campaign's event. She's in Miami. Tiffany?
Yeah, we've got food, drinks, music here. The energy is really picking up. You can feel the excitement and anxiousness here in the air as you talk to supporters. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell is hoping to flip the U.S. Senate seat. She was out campaigning here in Miami earlier today, making a last-ditch effort to connect with voters. And her campaign, she is running on protecting Medicare for seniors, tackling inflation, and women's reproductive rights. states. You can see here, everyone is gathering for a watch party. We've got dozens of people already, and Debbie McCarcel-Powell is expected to speak as the results come in. Now, this is expected to be a pretty tight race. Senator Rick Scott is defending his seat. It's one of the few GOP seats up for election this cycle. Reporting live in Miami, Tiffany Salome, Channel 4, the local station.
Thank you, Tiffany. And we've got an election alert for you right now. West Virginia, the state there with 4 electoral college votes, is being called for former President Donald Trump. We don't have any of the detailed numbers right now, but we're going to add those 4 electoral votes to the 19 that Mr. Trump already has. So 23 votes for him right now, 3 for Vice President Harris, as we're just getting started in some of our election results tonight.
In the meantime, let's go back to the topic of the U.S. Senate seat here in Florida. Chris Hand, you went last time. Let's start with you.
Sure.
Rick Scott, the incumbent. No surprises? Are we surprised?
Well, here, I mean, I think not surprising in that people expected him probably to win re-election. What is surprising is that this is a very not Rick Scott-like margin. I mean, when he was elected governor, he won by 1%. When he was re-elected governor, also 1%. When he was elected to the U.S. Senate the first time, won by 10,000 votes. So this margin is a relative landslide for Rick Scott. But as you can see, tied very closely to the presidential result here in Florida. People were obviously voting very similarly in those 2 contests at the top of the ballot, and looks like he's going to have a comfortable victory and return to the U.S. Senate for another 6 years.
Yeah. What about this idea that those down ballot races mirror what we're seeing at the top of the ticket? Do you see any of that happen? Is this maybe something that we'll see that Florida's expecting, maybe that Donald Trump comes out on top here?
Important, Kent. Let me put this in perspective. Not a surprise, but very significant. Let me tell you why in part significant. We'll be talking about this throughout the evening. The balance of power in the Senate. There's 34 races. In 23 of those races, the Democrats are defending. In 11 of those races, the Republicans are defending. And the Democrats hope that there were 3 vulnerable races, sort of. One is Ted Cruz in Texas, and others in Nebraska, and there was this race. And so this one appears to be off the table. It's very significant on that balance of power. But throughout the evening, what you're talking about is a little bit of ticket splitting, and it's become more and more uncommon. So who does well at the top of the ticket is important down ballot. Here you see Donald Trump winning in Florida. I think you could also take a look at the success of Rick Scott. With that, why this is so important is because we do expect in West Virginia and Montana to go Republican. But when you look to those blue wall states, who's going to be at the top of that ticket? Because you have competitive toss-up races in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And so in answer to your question, it is important who's at the top of the ticket, and it can either be a drag or it can hurt you down ballot. This was a significant, not a surprising win, but a significant win, particularly on the Republican side as they're seeking the balance of power in the Senate. The odds favor this evening, I think, that Republicans will take the balance of power in the Senate. They'll have a majority, favors it. It's a coin toss, however, in the House, but this is a pretty significant outcome.
Well, Tom, you want to talk about commercials. All I keep seeing is that snake going through Debbie McCarcel-Powell's commercial with the Rick Scott's head on it. She spent some money on commercials. He spent a whole lot more money, a lot of his own money on his race, and it seems to have paid off.
Well, he's done that historically, but the Democrats thought they had a very strong candidate this time. But you know, the power of incumbency and the fact that this has become a very red state. In fact, I throw this question out to the rest of the panel. Remember when Florida used to be a swing state?
Yes.
You know, you never know which way Florida was going to go. And what happened to that?
Well, I'll give you part of the answer to that, and this goes to Chris's discussion about the 1% wins. Florida has changed fundamentally. There's been a migration of people from blue states, particularly from New York, but also Illinois and California, and it has changed. It has flipped Florida. The registrations used to be several 100,000 advantage to the Democrat. It's now over 1 million in registration to the Republican. And let me keep this thought for the rest of the evening. That migration from blue states to red states is also happening in other places. You've seen increased Republican registration in Pennsylvania, for example, in Arizona and Nevada. It'll be interesting, and North Carolina. We'll have to see how that plays out for this evening. But Tom, you raised a really good point. I miss having all those candidates descend on Florida when we were a swing state. I don't miss the recount of 2000 when I was heavily involved in that. I was on the canvassing board and counsel to it. But Florida has changed fundamentally. Florida has reformed its process, and we're seeing one of the best processes in the state in terms of the election results. But in terms of this, Tom, I think a big part of it has been the migration. And Chris often points out rightfully that the Republican GOP apparatus in Florida is really, really strong.
So, John, I want to hear from you. And also one of these things that comes to mind there for me is that Rick Scott, if he wins, he's got another campaign that he's going to run because he wants to be the caucus leader in the U.S. Senate if he's reelected.
Yeah, and I want to lose 40 pounds. But the reality is that I don't see that happening. Rick Scott has got some issues in terms of how his personality is received on the Senate side. But let me say this also, going back to something you said. The Michigan 7th, this is Slotkin, is running for Senate.
Yes.
So that's an important race because now that House seat is up because she was held in that House seat. So I'm looking at that as well because that impacts both House and Senate.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
All right, folks, keep it right here. We are going to continue our coverage with our roundtable and our reporters who are spread out all across the state.
It is election night and vote 2024. Don't go anywhere.
Vote with the Democrats. Now, this is where things stand as we head into election night. There were 28 seats held by Democrats that are not up for election and 38 seats held by Republicans also not up for election. That's what the blue and red circles on this chart represent. The circles in the middle, the white circles, those are the seats up for election. And that's what we'll be filling in over the course of the night. And in fact, we have filled one in, that red dot right there with the blue circle around it. That is actually the results of the Senate race in West Virginia, where Joe Manchin opted not to run again. And the AP is right now calling that race for the Republican in that race, and that is Jim Justice. So he is going to be the senator for the great state of West Virginia. Here is a look at some of the races that will be most critical to the balance of power as people and pundits see it as of now. Let's start in Arizona, where Democrat turned independent independent Kyrsten Sinema is leaving the Senate. Democrat Ruben Gallego, a Marine Corps veteran, is running against Republican Carrie Lake, a former TV news anchor who ran for Arizona governor 2 years ago and lost. Election forecasters generally say this race leans Democratic. In Michigan, Democrat Debbie Stabenow is retiring. In the race are Democratic Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin and former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers. Some see this race as a toss-up. Others say it leans Democratic. Heading west to Montana, Democratic Senator Jon Tester is trying to hold on to his seat in a state that's become increasingly Republican. He faces Republican Tim Sheehy, a businessman and former Navy SEAL. This seat is seen as one that is likely to flip into Republican hands. In Nevada, Democrat Jackie Rosen is seeking re-election in a close race. She faces Republican Sam Brown, an Army vet who was badly burned when a bomb exploded in Afghanistan in 2008. Some forecasters say this leans Rosen's way. Others say it's a toss-up. Let's take you to Ohio. The race virtually everyone agrees is a toss-up, just too close to predict. Democrat Sherrod Brown hopes to hold on to his Senate seat. His Republican challenger is businessman Bernie Moreno. Pennsylvania Democratic Senator Bob Casey is seeking his fourth term. He faces Republican Dave McCormick, a former hedge fund CEO. McCormick ran for the Senate 2 years ago, but lost the Republican primary to Dr. Oz, who then lost in the general election to Democrat John Fetterman. Some say this race leans Casey's way. Others say it's a toss-up. And in Wisconsin, Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin seeks her third term. She faces Republican Eric Hovde, a bank CEO. Like several other of these races, some say this leans Democratic, but others say it's just a toss-up. We'll be tracking these races and more throughout the night as we watch the balance of power in the Senate and also in the House. Kent and Joy?
Yeah, key stuff to watch, Stacey, and pretty interesting as we see it throughout the night. Thank you.
All right, stick with us. We have a lot coming up, including a look at some local races. Welcome back to our Vote 2024 election night coverage as we count down to the next round of poll closings at 8 p.m. A little more than 10 minutes away. That's when polls will close in the Florida Panhandle as well as a dozen states from the Northeast to the Midwest.
Right now, we want to look at some of the results in local races that you may have seen on your ballot today.
We're not going to be able to talk about every race you may have voted on, but you will find the results scrolling across the bottom of your screen, as well as on News4JAX.com.
Yeah, so right now, let's look at St. Johns County and 2 questions on the ballot about funding for public schools. One question asked voters to extend a half-cent sales tax for the construction of schools. It was first approved by voters in 2015. It's scheduled to end at the end of 2025 unless it is extended, and at this point 60% of the votes are for extending that.
The second question asked voters to approve an increased property tax rate for school funding in order to fund higher teacher pay. Investments in school safety, student welfare, as well as programs like science, technology, art, music, athletics. It's similar to a millage rate increase Duval County passed several years ago. Taking a look at these results tonight, 83% of the vote in, 68% say yes, 32% are saying no. Now, for members of the local Democratic and Republican parties who have been working hard trying to get their candidates elected, tonight is huge.
Each local party gathering tonight for a party that they hope will be a celebration of victories for them. News4JAX reporters Janice Harris and Alicia Hatcher are out there tonight. And we start with Janice with the Duval County Democrats. Janice?
So they started out with a song played by the DJ here at this watch party. It was the song Freedom by Beyonce, which has been a song during the Harris Waltz campaign. We've heard many times as she's traveled and campaigned throughout this country. It's almost become the theme song for her. And if she wins, likely we'll hear that song again. That's the song they started out with here, created a lot of energy in this room. Lots of people and supporters for Harris Waltz, but also supporting a lot of campaigns locally. I spoke with the Duval County Democratic Chairman, Daniel Henry, who told me there's been so many changes this year. I talked to him about all the pivots from this election season. This is what he had to say.
It has been a mountain of work, I can tell you that. We've been up since 6 a.m. this morning, making sure that we're making calls to voters, making sure that people have rides to the polls, canvassing, text banking, phone banking. Our office was packed all day. But we're excited about this race. I think a lot of the voters that we've been talking to, especially over the course of the last 3 months, have been jubilant about this moment. And I think we're on the cusp of making history tonight.
There have been so many changes in this election season. We had one person running for president, now someone else running for president. Talk about the behind the scenes of pivoting and still getting voter engagement.
Yeah, I think when we start off this race a year, if you would have told me that it would have ended up like this, I'd have told you that this was just a fever dream. But I think recognizing the moment, President Biden stepping away was not only an opportunity for him to preserve his legacy, but allow for him to pass the baton on to Vice President Harris. And her ability to not only convey a message to the electorate that I think a lot of people are resonating with, but to be able to unite the party all at the same time, I think is a testament to her ability as a leader and her ability to bring people together, which I think has been the overall message of her campaign.
And even though all the results are not in yet, you can hear it behind me. It already sounds like a party for the Democrats in Duval County. Reporting live, Janice Harris, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, Janice, thank you. We're now going to go live to News4JAX reporter Alicia Hatcher.
Yeah, she's with the Duval GOP at their event at the Hyatt Regency downtown. Alicia?
It is a full house here, as you can see behind me. A lot of people are here eating, taking photos, having a good time. There is a lady walking around with a cutout. There is a cutout of Trump. Someone is walking around waving a flag. There have been several city officials here that have spoken since the watch party began. Sheriff T.K. Waters is here, as well as several city council members with me to talk live about what's happening here at the Duval County GOP He is is one of the chairmen, Dean Black. Dean Black, talk to me about what has this watch party been like so far?
Well, as you can see, it's very well attended. A lot of excitement here tonight. A lot of elected officials here. Many pouring in even still. I just heard Reginald Blunt, our school board candidate, has just rolled up into the parking lot. We're feeling very good about his race right now. And we're just feeling really good, really excited for Jacksonville and America.
What made this election cycle special?
Well, 70% of Americans think the country is headed in the wrong direction. They're very disappointed with the results of the Biden-Harris administration. And tonight, we stand at a turning point. This is a culmination of the efforts of many people and their prayers to right this nation and restore it to a place of prosperity and security for us and for our posterity.
Well, thank you so much, Chairman. A lot of people are still coming in this evening. They will be here until about midnight. For now, reporting live, Alicia Hatcher, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, thank you, Alicia, and thank you for being with us. Our coverage is just getting started. We're getting ready to see some polls close again in another 4.5 minutes. Don't go anywhere. It's election night and Vote 2024. Handle of the state of Florida.
That's right. We are closely watching what is happening in Florida and Georgia, watching the presidential numbers. Just in Duval County alone, they are extremely close. We'll be able to pop those up for you here shortly. But keep it right here. We're not only looking at Florida and Georgia and each county by county in those states, but as well as the swing states and the blue wall. So much to watch tonight.
At this point, we're also counting to that 270 number for Electoral College votes to find out who's going to be president. And at this point, there are 23 votes for President Trump based on 3 states that have been called for him: Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia. Vermont has been called for Vice President Harris, so there's 3 Electoral College votes for her so far. But obviously, lots of space here, lots of time to go.
Keep it right here. We are back after the break to bring you more of our Election 2024 coverage tonight.
Vote 2024, Election Night.
It is 8 o'clock now, still very early in Election Night 2024. And as we look at the current state of the electoral map and the race to 270, 3 states have been called for former President Trump. Vice President Harris has 1 state, so there are 23 votes for Mr. Trump, 3 votes for Ms. Harris. And as we go through this, we're going to be adding to that. I think we'll probably be adding some more states that are called for each candidate this hour. Hello, everyone. We'll soon be learning how more states are voting in the presidential race, though still quite some time from knowing an eventual winner.
Quite some time. Polls are now completely closed in the states that are solid green you see on the map. That includes Florida, where polls closed in the Panhandle, as well as about a dozen states from the Northeast to the Midwest. For the states in green and white stripes, some polls are closed, but polls close in parts of the state at 9 p.m. our time as we count down to when those states and others will close.
All right, I want to check in on where the presidential race stands here in Florida. So we'll take a look at here. And right now, very strong numbers for Donald Trump, 55% of the vote. That's more than 1 million votes in his favor versus the vice president at 44%.
And let's take a look at Georgia, one of the key swing states. You can see Donald Trump ahead right now at 55% to Kamala Harris's 44%.
So let's bring our roundtable in tonight. Tom Wills, Rick Mullaney, Chris and John Newman. Rick, get us started. What are you looking for as we get through that first hour since some of the polls have closed?
It's hard to say that Florida is much of an indicator, but I would say that Donald Trump, to me, has outperformed in Florida 55 to 44. You can remember it used to be 500 votes back in 2000, and then it became 1 or 2 points. Donald Trump, big victory in 2020. This outpaces that dramatically. And it goes to what Tom said earlier. The nature of what's happened in Florida and demographics have really, really changed. So big win for Donald Trump in Florida, big win for Rick Scott, not really unexpected. But as we look to the rest of the evening, again, its results it's very early, and and you mentioned this, Kent, keep an eye on that ticket splitting. How well does the top of the ticket do in each of these states, such as the big blue wall, because those are really toss-up Senate races. I think each of them leans Democrat, and they're helped by Kamala Harris at the top as opposed to Joe Biden. But the balance of power in the Senate obviously is important, and of course it's real early on the presidential race. Yeah. Every state we've seen so far has gone according to script, so we'll have to wait and see on more results.
And those races you mentioned with Senator Scott and former President Trump, those races haven't been called in Florida yet, but the numbers are adding up as we go.
And Rick, you said it, still so early. John Newman, I know you're looking at the numbers, especially around Atlanta and the suburbs there, but we throw up those numbers for Georgia and Donald Trump's way ahead, but again, it's only 8 o'clock.
Yeah, you've got to see the other major metropolitan areas come in. Atlanta, also Savannah.
Yes.
And Macon. You've got to look at all those areas and the surrounding, suburban counties around them and communities, rather, to see what the actual aggregate numbers look like. And so it's so early. I think, 16% is in Georgia right now? So we've got a long way to go. I think it's about 16% at this point in terms of what the turnout is. So I think, when the surrounding counties of Atlanta begin to come in, that's really the stronghold of Georgia. But don't count the other ones out, I think.
Yeah.
Chris?
I think the most important development happened 2 minutes ago, and that was the polls in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania closed. That is really probably likely to be the decisive state in this election. If Donald Trump wins Pennsylvania, the path for Vice President Harris to win the presidency becomes very, very difficult at that point. So I think that is one thing we're going to be tracking, not only over the next several hours, but maybe over the next couple of days, based on how Pennsylvania counts its votes, seeing those come in, seeing how that decisive swing state goes, in addition to, as Rick and John were saying, seeing those additional results come in from Georgia, North Carolina. But probably this is a contest where so goes Pennsylvania, so goes the nation.
Let me just say, I certainly do agree with that. It's Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. But let me come back to something John said about Georgia and waiting on those results from Atlanta. For the next few hours as we see these results come in, something to keep an eye on. This is a theme from 2016, from 2020, and from now, is that in those big urban areas, whether it's going to be Atlanta, whether whether later on it's in Phoenix, whether it's going to be in Philadelphia. Those are big numbers for Kamala Harris and the Democratic side, and they want to run up those numbers because when you get to the rural areas, those will be for Donald Trump. If you take a look at the map in Florida, it looks like a sea of red, in part because of those rural areas. That'll be true in Georgia too, but don't be misled by it because of what John's talking about. It's those population centers. And where does the battle get fought? It gets fought in those suburbs as they go back and forth. But in those urban areas throughout the evening, look for big numbers for Harris. In the rural areas, look for Donald Trump. And in those suburbs, look for a battle to take place. But I think Chris has hit upon the big picture for the evening, which is Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania.
Well, and I'll point out among our roundtable, we have two people who have lived and worked in Jacksonville a long time, but grew up in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Tom, this is the home state there. It's critical tonight.
Well, you know, the Allegheny County, the Democrats won it in 2020. They won it in 2016. And yet the Republicans continue to say this is going to be our year that we're going to win it, even though they've lost it by a lopsided margin. The thing that fascinates me is that we keep talking about how close this election is. The polls say how close this election is, but we go back to 2020, and Joe Biden won 6 of the 7 swing states that we're all watching. We go back to 2016, and Donald Trump won 6 of the 7 swing states. So as we begin to see these swing states be decided, we might jump to the conclusion that the winner of this election is going to win 6 of the 7 swing states based on history.
Well, it's certainly possible. I mean, just remember how narrow that margin was for Joe Biden in 2020. A change of about 43,000 votes in all of those swing states would have flipped the election entirely around. In 2016,
and 78,000 in 2016.
That's exactly right, Tom. So I mean, even if a candidate is able to kind of thread the needle like you're talking about, they thread it very thinly in many of these cases.
And speaking of Philadelphia, they need to actually bank about 500 to 550,000 in the plus side. And if they get those numbers coming out of Philadelphia and those surrounding counties, that portends for a win for Pennsylvania.
Offsets some of the
offsets the rest of the state, and also the same thing kind of in Detroit. If Wayne County, Detroit comes in at 50, 55, 57% turnout, usually a Democrat wins the state.
And we have to go to a
Rick's
quick
point earlier,
election. We got to get a quick election alert in here, and this will add to our conversation, by the way. Joy?
Yes, we're going to bring in John Acebus to give us a closer look at this, but Florida has been called. The first state, it looks like tonight, called by the Associated Press here, Donald Trump as the winner. But let's take a closer look at the numbers as we look at this electoral map, taking Florida's 30 electoral votes, adding that to Donald Trump's, so he is up at 95 to Harris's 35. John Acebus is standing by with a breakdown to let us see what happened in Florida.
Well, Trump won this handily. The difference between Trump and Harris right now is 1.1 million votes, or almost 1.2 million votes. If you go back to 2020, Trump won Florida, but only by 371,000 votes. That is almost stunning if you're just looking the numbers at the total. Let's move in to Northeast Florida right now. Duval County white because it's white hot with voters, and it's still deciding itself at this point. Right now, Trump, 49.5% of the votes. That is razor thin. Look at this number. Trump won Duval County at 129 votes. That small of a margin. Isn't that just crazy?
Holy moly.
Just nuts. And if you look back in 2020, it was a lot less close. Biden won that by more than 19,000 votes, or 18,000 votes rather. So these numbers are extraordinarily shocking. If we go up to Nassau County, Trump won handily at 73% of the vote. He improved on his percentage there from 2020. Really, all of the counties surrounding Duval County went red, and it's not the most surprising thing when we look at the history of these counties, but he's improved on his percentage there in Union County, and he's improved on his percentage there at 78% in Bradford County. Now, I want to move south because something that stuck out to me was Miami. Miami actually flipped. Biden won that vote by 85,000 votes in 2020. Trump absolutely flipped that. He won that with 103,000 votes being the difference at 55% of the vote. So Trump seems to have been doing a lot better than he did in 2020. But if we're going to shoot down the corridor too, it looks like Tampa also, Trump wins at 50.8% of the votes. The difference just 17,000 votes. This is an area that Biden won at 52% and the difference at 48,000 in 2020. So these are significant flips. I know obviously Florida was expected to go Republican. It's not shocking. But when you look at the I-4 corridor, or even Orlando in our heat map, is showing a different shade of blue. It's not the darker blue that you might expect. Harris still wins at 70,000 votes, being the difference with 55% of the votes. But these numbers really tell a story tonight. Trump absolutely went through Florida and he improved in almost every rural area, and with the exception of Duval County and the Orlandos, really just improved from 2020. So the numbers definitely telling a story tonight. Trump did really well in Florida. That's pretty much, that's how you sum that up.
Yeah. Thank you, John. So we've got several states that are being called tonight with our election alert. We just told you about Florida, and we're going to take these several states for the vice president, several states being called for the former president as well.
Let's start out with Alabama. That is being called by the Associated Press, going to Donald Trump as the projected winner right now. So that's 9 electoral votes.
Yeah, in the state of Mississippi, 6 electoral votes on the line there. This state is being called. Donald Trump is the projected winner there as well.
Next, let's take a look at Tennessee. Donald Trump, the projected winner here, so those 11 electoral votes will be going to him.
And this was expected, but Oklahoma, they have 7 electoral college votes. These are projected to go into Donald Trump's column.
All right, running now to South Carolina, 9 electoral votes are projected to go to Donald Trump. He is the projected winner by the Associated Press.
Several states being called for the vice president tonight. Kamala Harris expected to win in the state of Connecticut and pick up 7 electoral votes.
All right, let's take a look at Maryland, where Harris is expected to take the 10 electoral votes there. She is the projected winner.
Also expected that Massachusetts would go for the vice president. Projected winner here, Kamala Harris, 11 electoral votes.
And finally, Harris is also the projected winner for Rhode Island. 4 electoral votes there will go in her pot.
Yeah, so when we look at all the numbers together here, that's where we had some updated counting here. 35 electoral votes for Vice President Harris right now. Former President Trump with 95 votes. 270 is the magic number to win the White House tonight. All right, we want to go to the Duval County Supervisor of Elections office now.
That's where Ashley Harding is standing by. Ashley. All right, we're going to come to Ashley in just a moment. With all of these are not necessarily, gentlemen, these are not the swing states that we're waiting for intensely. But is there anything that you're reading from what's just happened?
Well, I wanted to make a point about my home state of Pennsylvania. I hope I don't hurt your feelings, but you see all these states that are being called at 8 o'clock at night, including Florida. And to Jerry Holland's point about how secure our elections are, what are they doing in Pennsylvania? For one thing, they're not counting their mail-in ballots until 7 o'clock this morning, and they don't have early voting up there either, so they had long lines at the polls today. They have not done anything since 2020 to improve their election process up there, and that's why, I mean, they're an important state, but they're keeping the entire country in suspense. Are you proud of yourself, Pennsylvania?
Well,
now that I'm living in Florida, I can get away with this.
I know you're from Pennsylvania. Go ahead, John, but I do want to add on what Tom said.
Just blame it on the legislature. I mean, everybody wants it to change. Shapiro was upset about it, but they did do some improvements of investing in the structure and infrastructure of how they do their accounting, but it's still not going to be today. And bottom line, it's not going to happen today.
And that's what we need to know, is where they're going.
After 2020, which the election wasn't called for 4 days, in which people were waiting for so many days, you did see reform in some places. The statute was changed in Michigan, and now they count before Election Day. It was also changed in Nevada. They now count before Election Day. And in Florida, what we saw from 2000 over the last couple decades, really a state that has become sort of a national model in terms of getting those results done early.
We don't have hanging chads anymore.
No, I was there for those. We do not.
Thank you, Rick Maloney.
But to Tom's point, in Pennsylvania, there are 44 states that count early before Election Day, and only a handful of states that don't. Unfortunately for all of us in a long night, a couple of those are from the swing states. Pennsylvania's at the top of the list. They don't start processing till today, and they don't start tallying until the the polls closed. And so that means it's going to be a delay, although they hope to do it quicker. The other place is Wisconsin. They didn't start counting till today, and Wisconsin's another key state. Absolutely. And for different reasons, because of, you mentioned at the top of the program, for different reasons, Arizona and Nevada are likely to be a while too. So as we look at to those 7 swing states, we're hoping to get some indications from Georgia and North Carolina, but it could be a while in Pennsylvania, it could be a while in Wisconsin, and of course later in the night, Nevada and Arizona, if we even get it tonight. So hold on to your seats.
Well, I want to give a little credit where credit is due to the Keystone State, Tom, in the sense that, as John alluded to earlier, some of the big metro areas have invested a lot in voting equipment, tabulating equipment, particularly in Philadelphia, to speed this up. But also in Allegheny County, officials today were saying they think Allegheny could actually be done with all of its outstanding ballots either late tonight or certainly by tomorrow. So that is a place. In fact, I think Allegheny County is the swing county in the entire election.
Especially based on the appearances that both Mr. Trump and Ms. Harris made in Pittsburgh.
That is, and I think we'll get those results sooner rather than later, certainly much sooner than we did 4 years ago.
All right. Okay, all right. So tonight, supporters of Kamala Harris are gathered at Howard University in Washington, D.C. for her campaign's election night watch party.
The historically black university is Harris's alma mater. That's where she graduated with a degree in economics and political science. Our election correspondent Julia Benberg live at Howard University, and we can hear the party going on behind you there, Julia.
A lot more action than when we spoke earlier today. This is the yard area at Howard University, and this is an area where students spend a lot of time. In fact, Vice President Kamala Harris has described this as one of her favorite places on campus because she could really see the full spectrum of the student body as people were out here and enjoying. And so let me step to the side here just a little bit. You can see the stage is set and people are already beginning to bring enthusiasm into the evening. This is a full circle moment for Harris. That's how she described it during a radio interview earlier today. This is where she ran her first campaign for freshman class representative. It's where she chaired the Economic Society, and it's where she became a member of the AKA sorority. In fact, you see a lot of pink and green to my view over here representing that group. I was speaking with someone in the crowd just a few moments ago. He said he was a freshman on campus here when she was a senior, and he has 2 daughters who are about college age, and they're going to be watching tonight. And he's excited for them to see this historic moment. She is the first black woman and the first Asian American to lead a major party ticket, and if she is victorious, would be the first female president.
Julia, we haven't heard her use that as a campaign talking point. Obviously, it's been a very unique election cycle, too. Harris just becoming the nominee a few months ago. How has she defined herself to voters?
Right, when we were speaking about this election just a few months ago, there was a different name at the top of the Democratic ticket. When President Joe Biden stepped away, he endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, and then we saw a surge of enthusiasm and a surge in fundraising dollars. Democrats really believing that they had a chance to take it. Now, Harris has worked to define herself, leaning on her past work as a prosecutor, as a senator, as a stepmom to 2 children, and also as, you know, someone that grew up in a middle-class family. She's leaned on her background as well. She's had some challenges, though, when it comes to embracing the work of the current administration, but also trying to distance herself from Biden as he has a low approval rating right now.
I have been honored.
Julia, a quick question for you.
Biden's vice president. But I will bring my own experiences and ideas to the Oval Office. My presidency will be different because the challenges we face are different.
Biden did not have any public events today. He's going to be watching results from the White House as they come in this evening. A kind of a surreal moment for someone who was at the top of the ticket just a few months ago.
Julia, quick question for you. Both campaigns keeping an eye out, of course, for results in any of the key battleground states. A lot of what ifs. That's what we're doing right now. What if this happens? What if that happens? What would be her easiest path to victory?
So, of course, several different paths to victory for both of these candidates, and all eyes are on those 7 key battleground states as we wait for the results to come in. Her probably easiest path to victory includes the so-called blue wall battlegrounds. That's Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. These are states that historically vote Democratic, but they flipped for Trump in 2016 and then swung back for Biden in 2020. Pennsylvania really key because it's a part of most of the paths for victory for both Harris and for Trump. And in 2020, it took several days to get results in that state. Governor Josh Shapiro saying he doesn't think it's going to take that long this time around. There's been some changes in the counting process. There's also less mail-in ballots since we're not in the middle of a pandemic, but that could delay when we find out who the winner is.
Yeah, it's certainly something we'll be watching for because we know all of us who are reporting on this, Julia, are going to be watching for when those results come in. Julia Benbrook in Washington, D.C. tonight. Hopefully we'll be talking with you again very soon.
All right, taking a look at where Kamala Harris is going to be tonight versus where Donald Trump is going to be. We know that he's going to be at Mar-a-Lago watching the results come in, but the supporters are at the Palm Beach Convention Center. Does that matter? Was there any strategery? Is that a word? Any strategery when it comes to? Oh no, we're going to talk to our roundtable momentarily. We're going to go first.
Yeah, the former president's resident Mar-a-Lago is where he's been most of the time tonight, and Michael Yoshida is joining us live from the Palm Beach Convention Center. Michael.
Hey, good evening, guys. We're here at Trump headquarters at the Palm Beach Convention Center. Probably around 1,000 or so of the former president supporters have now made their way inside the room where several thousand as the evening goes on. They're here obviously to show their support for the former president, and they're taking it all in, watching some of the early results start to roll in. Of course, they're expecting potentially a long evening here. We do know from aides of the former president, he's over at Mar-a-Lago with some close family and friends, but at some point the expectation is he will make his way over here, step into the room, address his supporters. Even, we're told, even if there is no official outcome of the race at some point this evening, he will be here. It's been a busy day already, though, for the former president. Early this morning, he cast his ballot. Then he made his way over to Trump headquarters here, talking with his staffers, with supporters, expressing confidence, also talking about the state of the race and some of the recent endorsements he picked up over the last few days.
I feel very confident. I have felt. You know, we went in with a very big lead today, and it looks like Republicans have shown up in force. You know, I was honored to get Joe Rogan last night. I mean, Joe Rogan's a big deal. He's a very respected person. And I must tell you, Megyn was fantastic. She got up and said some things that were really pretty amazing.
So the former president there addressing again some of those endorsements he picked up over the last 24 hours or so. And we know it's been a busy day for former President Trump, but he continues to work this evening. We're told that he's been calling into radio stations, some even in Pennsylvania, urging people to get out and vote. And if they are in line, to stay in line and make sure that their vote counts this election. Back to you.
Yeah, Michael, so what's the campaign saying that they're watching for? What are they really focused on this election day? Because we know a very late night for President Trump doing that 2-hour speech past midnight last night in one of the swing states.
For sure. So a lot of eyes, of course, on those swing states. The campaign's talking about, of course, more than 80 million people already cast their votes in early voting. But the focus of the campaign sounds cliche, but turnout. A lot of emphasis on that, in particular because this campaign, they did things a little differently than in the past. They outsourced some of their ground game operations to other political organizations, whether it be Charlie Kirk's political organization or...
All right.
Michael, thank you. We've got to cut in.
Organization. We also saw Elon Musk
Michael
getting involved
Yoshida,
with
I'm so
that.
sorry. We're going to cut you off because we got to go down to South Florida. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell is speaking in the U.S. Senate race here in Florida.
Let's listen to it.
Over a year ago. I want to thank the volunteers that have put hours and hours and hours of text banking and phone calls, knocking on doors, communicating with voters, trying to give them the message that there was another choice in this election, a choice of someone that would fight for them every step of the way. I want to thank and acknowledge my incredible team. This team, oh man, they were full of ideas. My social media was on fire. I never thought I would have a TikTok account the way that I did. Aaron organizing the people all over the country for the text banks because so many people believed what was possible. Aiden, who drove me, 35,000 miles is what he was telling me all over. I am so fortunate and privileged to have had this incredible opportunity to be the nominee representing the Democratic Party here in the state of Florida, to give Florida a new view on what we could do together. And there were millions of Floridians that today came out to say no más. Millions of Floridians that wanted change for the state of Florida, but today we were not successful. We were not successful in making sure that we sent someone up to Washington, D.C. that would protect Medicare and Social Security. We were not successful in sending a champion that would fight for our communities to reduce gun violence. We were not successful in sending a woman, a mom, who would be fighting every single day for our daughters and women in the state of Florida to protect their reproductive freedom. And I want to say this. I am proud to be a Floridian. This state needs a lot of love. It needs a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. But I want you to think of this. We did not win this battle, but the fight is just getting started because let me tell you something. If you think that this Latina right here is giving up on Florida, then I don't think you've been paying attention. I have been so lucky to meet Floridians on the trail. Rita Wilson, a retiree with cancer, who continued to knock on doors to send the message that we needed to protect our civil rights. Seniors in the Panhandle who have been forced to go back to work because of the failure of the Republican Party in this state that have taken everything away from our seniors, including the dignity to be able to make it in this state. Students, incredible students showing all across the state of Florida. Thank you, Gen Z. Wow. You are rocking it. I'm coming back because let me just tell you, you have formed a family that is going to make sure that we will take our state in the right track. We are not going to give in. We are not going to give up. I will continue to keep my eye on the prize, and I want all of you to do the same. Florida, I heart you so much. Let's continue to work on our state. Thank you so much.
Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, her concession speech. Rick Scott has won the U.S. Senate race in Florida, and there she is addressing all of her supporters. We're going to send it over now to John Acebis, who has a breakdown of how Florida voted in this Senate race. John?
Yeah, if Mucarsel-Powell comes back the way she says she's going to want to come back, she's going to have to come way back. She lost by 1.2 million votes here in 2024, and for Rick Scott, this was a much better improvement than what he saw with Ben Nelson back in 2018 when he just kind of narrowly won the state. But here in 2024, Scott dominated, but I do want to come in here to Duval County. Duval County is white here on the heat map because it's close. Scott won at 49.4%. Mucarsel-Powell had 48.9%, so that's still razor thin. The difference here in the votes, just 2,139 votes, and we know a lot of Duval County voted in this election, so each vote counted here in this area. Now let's zoom out here and just kind of show you the rest of the state as a whole. Mucarsel-Powell did do well in Alachua County. It looks like actually Scott improved upon what he did in 2020. So he shaved some votes out of Alachua County, where she got 67,000 votes, but he kind of just shaved narrowly off to win that area. And if we head west here, just kind of working west to east in our counties, Escambia County, Rick Scott won 61%, 76%. We're not going to see a county that she won from west to east till we get to Tallahassee, and that's Gadsden. She won 60.9% of the vote. Again, Rick Scott improved in that area from what he did in 2020, and it looks about the same here in Leon County. And then, of course, when you start hitting east and you hit Jefferson County, it's Rick Scott all the way up to Duval County, which he did still win. It was just a little bit more narrow. Let's head down to Orlando to see how she did there. It looks like in most of these races in each of these counties, Ben Nelson did better than what Mucarsel-Powell could do. So Rick Scott really opened this thing up. Is there something you want to?
Bill Nelson.
Bill Nelson. Am I saying Rick Nelson?
You said Ben. It's okay.
Bill Nelson. I apologize. Thank you, Kent. I appreciate that. If we're going to go back down south here, too, I think this is important to mention. Trump flipped Miami, and Rick Scott did really well here. He did much better in Miami than what he did back in 2020. And what the research that I was looking up here on my computer is that Trump's doing well and the Republicans are doing well with the Hispanic vote. That's just naturally how that progressed throughout the evening. So Miami, Rick Scott wins this. Nelson won that county back with 60% of the vote. So it just looks like Republicans as a whole, including Rick Scott, improved upon what we saw in 2018. So that's really how the numbers are shaking out.
All right, thank you, John. And one of the things that we're waiting for right now, we understand that Senator Scott is going to address this crowd. He's in Bonita Springs tonight. This is hometown, if you will, for him. Headquarters is down there. This is where we saw him host parties 6 years ago. And then the 4 years before that, when he was running for re-election. And then the 4 years before that, 2010, when he won as governor, 2 terms as the governor in the state of Florida. And we'll be waiting to hear from Senator Rick Scott here in just a moment.
You see that? A packed house waiting to hear from Senator Rick Scott.
Very busy day for Senator Scott. He actually began the day here in Jacksonville. And so, again, waiting for him. We'll bring that to you once he does begin to speak.
In the meantime, let's give you some more numbers of states that are being called by the Associated Press and are coming in. An election alert. This one, we're going to start with Arkansas. Let's take a quick look at the results that the Associated Press is calling. They are projecting Donald Trump as the winner. 6 electoral votes here for Donald Trump.
State being projected for Vice President Harris now. New Jersey coming in. 14 electoral votes going to the column for the vice president there. So we look at the electoral map here. And again, it's we've got numbers here as well. 54% of the vote there. Almost 100,000 difference in the votes for the New Jersey.
All right, let's take a look at our electoral map. We're talking now, the tally is at 49 electoral votes for Harris, 101 for Donald Trump. Still, I'm looking at all those yellow outlined states, nothing.
Not yet. And so let's bring in our roundtable while we're waiting for Senator Scott to speak with us. Anything stand out to you? And what lots of states that we've just reported on in these 2 races, or the 2 candidates there in the Senate race.
A couple thoughts, Tom. Back in 2022 in the midterms, we were expecting a red wave nationally. That didn't happen, but there was a red wave in Florida. You look at the governor's race, you look at the congressional races, you look at the Florida legislature. In 2022, Florida very red. Here we are in 2024. It's a big night for Donald Trump. 12 to 13 point margin, much bigger than the Real Clear Politics average is about 8. For Rick Scott, a very big margin, 12 to 13%. And you see these amendments both coming up a little bit short of the 60%. So keep an eye on those congressional races in Florida. That relates to the balance of power and, of course, to the Florida legislature. But so far tonight, Florida is very red. Now, as in 22, what does that mean? Is this an indication of something else for the rest of the nation? I'm not so sure about that. But if you're looking at the results now, certainly a big night for Rick Scott, big night for Donald Trump, big night for the Republican Party so far in Florida.
Anything we can glean from anything that has happened. I mean, the battleground states, we know what to look for in the little counties and the swaths and what have happened. But what about Surely there's something you can tell me from what's happened.
Well, I think one thing, there were a couple of states that have now they're now being called for the vice president. I think the Trump campaign hoped to be competitive, and New Jersey was one that you just called. That's one that, frankly, back when President Biden was still in the contest, the Trump campaign made a big deal about the fact that it might be able to take the Garden State. Obviously, that didn't happen. She has leads, it looks like, in New Hampshire and Virginia, 2 other states. But I do think, I want to follow up what Rick said about Florida, because even though that may not tell us a lot about the nation, I think it does tell us a lot about Florida. This is a now seminal election for the state of Florida. This makes, obviously, multiple statewide elections where Democrats have not won. That loud sound you hear is the sound of Democratic national checkbooks being closed in terms of future investment in the state of Florida. When you lose a presidential election in a U.S. Senate race by double digits, which is what has happened tonight, that really signals very loud and clear to people around the country that Florida is a red state. And as we know, winning begets winning and losing begets losing. So I think Florida Democrats have a lot of soul searching to do. They have to get back to basics, registering voters. The gap we saw tonight is very much in line with that overall kind of margin. We got to go back to registering voters, figuring out how to win, be competitive in more counties, and then ultimately turn people out.
So we're going to go now to Bonita Springs and on the West Coast there in South Florida. Senator Rick Scott addressing his supporters tonight.
Well, Florida, we did it. And for once, we did it before midnight. I want to thank God. I want to thank my beautiful wife who put up with me. My wonderful daughters, Allison. And their husbands, Pierre and Shane.
Oh, Allison. Hello.
And Jordan. And their husbands, Pierre and Shane. And my perfect grandsons. And I want to thank my mom, who couldn't be here. So, and guess what? We won Miami-Dade. So I think we won every constitutional officer down there. We have a new sheriff, Rosie. It's unbelievable what happened. Together, this is a team event. Together we get to celebrate a great victory tonight. There's a lot of people to thank. There's a lot of people that knocked on doors, made phone calls, did text. We had a lot of people just busted their butts in every one of these places. So we had a great campaign team led by Jackie Zeckman. We have a great office team. We've got 10 offices led by Craig Carbone. Now, let's do something fun. Keep your hands up if I ask you. Raise your hand if you worked in the governor's office. Raise your hand if you were appointed by me when I was governor, or you have a family or friend that was. How about you worked in my Senate office? Keep your hands up. Or you worked at the National Republican Senatorial Committee when I was a chair. Or you worked at the RNC in my last election. Or you volunteered or you're donated. Almost everybody is part of that. This is a team win. We won, they lost. Every person in this room has a dream. My dream is that every child, I don't care the color of their skin, their religion, where they were born, has a chance to live the dream of this country. If that's true, it's a hell of a country. And that's what we're going to do. But our work is not done. Next week, we have another election. Senate Republican leader. So 2 years years ago, I challenged Mitch McConnell because I know there has to be a change. We have a great Republican Party all across this country. We need a Republican Party in D.C. We need a Republican Party to start solving the problems of this country, and we have a significant number of problems. Florida is the center of the Republican Party of this country. Washington can learn a hell of a lot from what we've done right here in this great state. We are the best melting pot in the world. Los votantes hispanos son republicanos hoy. Hoy enviamos un fuerte mensaje al mundo. Florida is roja. Y no hay lugar para el socialismo en los Estados Unidos, especialmente la Florida. Ha sido un honor viajar por el Estado, construyendo increíbles coaliciones de América Latina durante todo el año. Los votantes hispanos son republicanos. Ganamos en grande hoy. God bless you. God bless this great country. And guys, what do we say? Let's get to work.
Campaign calling card of Rick Scott, two-term governor of the state of Florida, and now elected to a second term in the U.S. Senate tonight.
All right. That means we have an election alert. We are going to take you now to Delaware, where that state is being called the projected winner, Kamala Harris. 3 electoral votes there in Delaware.
And we're also seeing that the state of Illinois is being called the projected winner for Vice President Harris. 19 electoral votes. That was expected, but certainly adds to the total here. Let's take a look at the map for across the country right now. 71 electoral votes for Vice President Harris. Former President Trump has 101. You need 270 to win. We'll be watching that tonight.
All right, stick with us. Our coverage of election 2024 continues right after this short break.
All right, and thanks for being with us tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. Another dozen states wrap up their voting, so that's just 14 minutes away. The states stretching from New York to Wyoming. And soon after the polls close, we'll likely have a few more states called in the presidential race tonight. On the right-hand side of your screen, you're seeing former President Trump's watch party there in Palm Beach, West Palm Beach at the Convention Center there tonight.
Right now, let's take a look at a couple of amendments we want to show you. In Florida, Amendment 3 is being called right now. That has not passed. Legalizing recreational marijuana. You see 56% said yes, 44% said no, but you have to have a 60% threshold to pass any of the amendments that are on the Florida ballot.
And so Amendment 4 we're also looking at tonight, and this is being called as failing to pass tonight. 57% in favor of, and again, not meeting that 60% threshold. Florida Amendment 4 was about the right to abortion, and that does not pass tonight. We'll be watching all of the amendments and give you results as they come in as well. And tonight we're also getting insight into the issues and beliefs that motivated voters to vote a certain way in the presidential race.
Tarek Miner and Scott Johnson joining us now with data from the AP VoteCast survey of voters. Tarek and Scott.
Well, Joy, now that the state of Florida has been called for President Trump, we're taking a closer look at the margin by which he won, how he did with men and women, and the demographics of the voters who helped him with the state's 30 electoral votes.
Yeah, we're going to start looking at the demographics of the Trump voters reporting in the Sunshine State. If we could pull up that first graphic right here. Take a look here. White voters, Trump performing very well, 54%.
Is Harris.
I'm sorry, Harris voters. Yes, 54% of the vote going to Harris there. And African-American voters for Harris, 23%. For the Latino and Hispanic vote, 19% of them voting for Harris, and other 4%.
And now let's break down how the Trump voters went. He did very strong with white, 74%, African-American and black. He was low, but not low enough to where it would affect him winning. As we saw, he won 5%, 17% Latino and Hispanic. Of course, that's huge in South Florida, where we know Miami-Dade County flipped, according to the most recent reports I saw. Other races at 4%. So that's kind of where Trump was as far as the racial breakdown of people who are supporting him in the state of Florida.
All right, now let's go to our next slide and look at how Florida male voters and how they showed out for Kamala Harris. 41% of Florida male voters voting for Harris. And then as expected, former President Trump performing well with the electorate, 56% of Florida male voters going his way.
And you can possibly tell, so that's a 15% swing for male for Trump. It was closer on the female side. So Trump closed that gap. Harris leading, but not by as much as he was leading with males. So you can really see the difference there, that Trump kept it close with female voters. 51% Harris, 47% for Trump. So that gender breakdown, you know, could be somewhat of a difference. He outperformed with the men, she outperformed with women, but not by as much.
Now let's take a look at the age of the voters. We know that the 18 through 29 age group was really targeted by both campaigns, who had some really serious social media campaigns, and we're really trying to get out the vote in these colleges and universities, especially Kamala Harris. And as you see here, not performing as well as her team might have liked. Only 15% of the age group 18 to 29 voting for Harris, but then the 30 to 44, 25% voting for Harris, and then 45 to 64 years old, 31% of the people voting for Harris, and then 65 plus, the seniors in the state of Florida, only 30% voting for Kamala.
And it looks like Donald Trump kept similar numbers to Harris, not too dissimilar, a few minor adjustments. He was roughly the same with young voters, 18 to 29. He was at 14%. 21% of his vote came from 30 to 44 years old. 45 to 64, a third of his vote, another third were seniors. So they had their age breakdown, Tarek, it seemed, you know, somewhat similar as far as the age breakdown.
Yeah, and just we don't have any graphics for this information, but this is pretty interesting. We found that 7% of the people in Florida reported having difficulty uncertainty in voting because of the hurricanes. And also 24% say that they are not confident that their votes will be counted accurately. So that's just additional information that's coming in from people.
And that's 7% for hurricanes. You know, 7% is a lot of people.
Yeah.
So that's intriguing that hurricanes played a role, because we're only, what, a month or so out from the recent storm. So that definitely an issue that's a Florida-centric issue that many states are not dealing with. We're going to send it back to you.
All right, Scott, Tarek, thank you very much. Joining me now, we're going to get that Gen Z perspective. Polls suggesting younger voters are increasingly likely to be more interactive this year. We have Amelia Shepard. She is a UNF senior majoring in political science, registered Republican who first registered in high school as a Democrat, then changed her party in college. We're also joined by Katie Renzi, triple major, class of 2025 in sociology, political science, and interdisciplinary studies. I saw you both looking at the breakdown of how Florida voted, and I heard a couple wows. What were we wowing about?
I think we were especially surprised between how, I guess, even it was between our 18 to 29-year-old age group. It was about 15% of Florida voters voted for Harris in our age group, 18 to 29, and then 14% voted for Donald Trump in our age group.
And why does that surprise you?
I would just, personally, I would suspect it to be leaning towards a little bit more towards Harris, since the younger demographic, I feel like, leans left more. But like, it was just it was a shock to me.
Well, Katie, Democrat, surprised?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see a 19-point age gap between Trump and Harris supporters. That, I mean, I've been tracking, you know, elections in Florida since 2016, and I don't remember there being a gender gap that great in any of the other elections I looked at for Florida. So I'm wondering what the implications of that are going to be for the rest of the country, if that gender split is going to, you know, be larger, or, you know, stay the same.
Well, we will be watching that as well. Taking a look at Florida overall, the state called for Donald Trump. Surprises here? Either of you? No?
No, not at all.
No. Okay.
I mean, that was like a given going into this. There are obviously some districts and counties in Florida that turn out blue, but since Ron DeSantis really took the gubernatorial election, the state has leaned incredibly right since then. So, yeah.
All right. We are watching for swing states. Do you watch for that, or are you only concerned here about Florida?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was like, you know, key to my, like, you know, voting decision, my voting strategy, voting third party. I would, if I was living in a swing state, I would 100% vote for Kamala Harris, and it sort of, you know, is unfortunate that we have an electoral college system where we don't really feel represented here if we're not a swing state, but I definitely think that the only states that it's going to come down to are those 7 that we've been talking about for 5 months now.
Any one in particular?
Pennsylvania. I mean, that's the bellwether everyone's saying. I personally think the, you know, Rust Belt's going to break together. That's at least my hope, is that, you know, if we get that, and then Nebraska will be good.
Very quickly, 30 seconds left. Conspiracy theories are out there. People unsure that this is a safe voting process. How do you feel about that?
I feel like, as the Republican sitting up here, I especially have to say it. The last election in 2020, Donald Trump had the opportunity to challenge any election fraud or any interference with the voting process, and he wasn't able to bring enough evidence. So if he feels like he needs to this time to challenge that process, he can do so. But being like the lawyer in me that wants to be one day, you have to provide your evidence, and you have to bring a good challenge in court.
And Katie, very quickly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I second what Amelia said. We've been talking a lot about the electoral, you know, decisions on the Republican side and how there needs to be an acceptance there.
All right. Katie, Amelia, we appreciate your insight into the younger generation, Gen Z. Folks, stay with us. Our election 2024 coverage continues after the break. We are just minutes away from 9 o'clock and another round of poll closings in more than a dozen states as we look live to the right-hand side at Kamala Harris's campaign headquarters there at Howard University as they await the results for the night.
Yeah, we don't want you to go anywhere because many more results coming in. Stay with us for election night and Vote 2024.
From Channel 4, the local station, this is special coverage of Vote 2024, Election Night.
All right, it's 9 o'clock here on the East Coast, about 2 hours into the heart of election night, and this is where the Electoral College map stands right now in the race to 270. Vice President Harris with 71 and 101 votes for Donald Trump. And thanks for joining us. Now, very soon, we will likely be adding to the states on that map as polls are now closed in much of the midsection of the country.
Yes, so voting just ended in all of the states you see in green on this map. We do want to note voting is over in Arizona, though no results will be released until 10 p.m. our time. We are now counting down to that 10 o'clock hour when we will start to get those results and numbers from other states, including the key swing state of Nevada.
All right, checking in on the race for president here in Florida. The state has been called for Donald Trump. Winner tonight with 56% of the vote here as the results are coming in, but the AP has called this state for the Republican nominee.
And in Georgia, a swing state being watched very closely tonight. It is very close there. Donald Trump with 52% of the vote. Kamala Harris 47 for now. Those 16 electoral votes still up in the air.
Two other swing states where voting ended in the last hour and a half include North Carolina. You see that on the left there. Donald Trump was in the lead at that point and 52% of the vote. And then we're also checking in on Michigan, where much of the state ended at 8, but some areas ended just now at 9 o'clock. Vice President Harris with the lead there with 52% of the vote.
All right. Well, beyond the presidential race, a handful of races, other races being watched very closely around the entire state of Florida tonight.
Yeah, we'll start with the race for U.S. Senate. Republican Rick Scott has been reelected. Elected to a second term. He's defeated Democrat Debbie Mucarsel-Powell tonight with 56% of the votes that have come in so far.
Checking in now on some of the proposed amendments. We begin with Amendment 3, which would legalize recreational marijuana for adults 21 years and older. The Associated Press saying this amendment has failed. A reminder, amendments must get more than 60% to pass, and as you can see, only 56% voting for that amendment, voting yes.
The other high-profile amendment is Amendment 4, dealing with abortion access in the state of Florida, and with 57% voting yes, this amendment also will fail to pass tonight. All right, let's check in with our roundtable local political experts tonight. And Tom, why don't you give us some of the perspective here? Here it is, a couple hours into this election, and we're still waiting to see where the trends are.
Well, we were talking earlier about Florida. The red state seems to have gotten redder with the performance of Senator Scott and former President Trump, and it would indicate that the outcome of these two amendments is another indication that Florida's just gotten redder, Rick.
It certainly has. And for other early indications, it's really, really early, something that Chris stressed early. But early indications is a pretty good night for Donald Trump. Of course, some of this is according to script. Early results in Michigan favor Kamala Harris, but early results in North Carolina and Georgia, again, very preliminary, favoring Donald Trump. But according to the trend lines, a very close battle, 50-50, with 60% of the vote reporting in Virginia, dead heat. Now, there's more urban areas that are let to report in Virginia, so that would favor Kamala Harris. But very early in the evening, but overall, if you're Donald Trump, cautiously optimistic about some trends that you may be seeing.
I just saw out of the corner of my eye that electoral map flicker a little bit, and I see a few more states have been called for Donald Trump. If we can take a look at that electoral map, pop that up real quick for our viewers. We are seeing that North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming have been called. Harris now at 99 electoral maps, 118 for Donald Trump. We're going to talk more about what we're seeing on this map in just a minute.
Yeah, John, Chris, what are you seeing? And again, we see a very red Florida night in some of these results.
But I'm agreeing with both what Tom and Rick said, that there's been such a demographic shift into Florida from other states, and they're coming here and they're voting Republican. But I go back to a conversation I had with Barack Obama's data guy, David Seaman, some years ago after Barack won his second term. He said, Florida's trending light blue. Look how it's changed. Yeah. And commensurately, the party, the National Party, has not infused anything in its infrastructure. And from this result, they totally won't be doing it in the future. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah, Chris, do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, we've obviously talked about this some, that you know, this is, when you see these trends set in, what a state like Florida needs to make a change to become competitive again is a big boost in Democratic voter registration, and then building out the turnout infrastructure that will kind of help you win elections. The way you do that is with funding, and most of that funding comes from national Democratic donors to pay for that sort of voter infrastructure. After a result like this, where Donald Trump and Rick Scott both won their contests by double digits, 2 years after Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio won their contest by double digits, that national Democratic money, to the extent there was any left, is now going to go other places. So, like we talked about earlier, Florida Democrats have a lot of soul searching, a lot of work, a lot of back to basics to do. Have to go back to figuring out how to register voters, try and close that gap, and make incremental progress to help make the state competitive again. But I think, as both Rick and John pointed out, there are these demographic shifts, people moving into Florida, that are going to make that task difficult going forward.
And Chris, it's going to be fascinating to see how the other abortion rights proposals in other states, how they perform compared to Florida.
It will be. Now, there is a little bit of an apples and oranges difference in that some of those only have to pass with 50% plus one. We do have that heightened supermajority standard. So, look, it is clear the overwhelming majority of the state, 57, 58%, wanted Amendment 4 to pass. They just didn't reach that 60% threshold that we have and some other states don't have.
Yeah.
Well, in the race for president, it was a lot closer in Duval County. Very, very close. Let's check in now with the Duval County Supervisor on Elections.
Ashley Harding is there right now to bring us a live report. Ashley?
Now, where all the items, that the equipment at the polling locations are being brought back. They're being brought back on trucks just like this one. They just closed this one up, but inside they had the things that are used for the polling locations, thumb drives, tapes, things like that. They go down this conveyor belt type system they have here, and they go up to these people and they scan them, make sure that they have them on, and all that good stuff. So it's really, this is really the important part, to make sure that they have all this equipment in case.
We will not go home until everything's back in, and everything's color coded. So they're looking for certain color bags that are important. Also, provisional ballots will be coming back in. We want to make sure they're in our possession. So again, the important things that we want to count for, we won't go home till they come in.
You know, we're seeing some results now, and we're looking at how Duval County fared. What's your take on everything as far as voter turnout, things like that, enthusiasm?
You know, overall, I was expecting a higher turnout. I thought really this election was going to engage more voters than we saw in 2020, but about the same amount turnout.
Okay, Okay, so looking live once again, here is another truck. I know it was hard to hear me a moment ago, but these are all items and equipment that is used at the polling locations being brought back here to the supervisor of elections office. So every piece of equipment has to be back here. It has to be accounted for before these folks can go home, because again, it comes back to the possibility if there ever is a need for a recount, they can't be looking for these things and tracking them down. Everything has to be accounted for. So it is a process, and it is an interesting behind the scenes look at how this all works. And you just see, and you hear the excitement too, because we've been waiting for quite a while for this. And you heard there a second ago Jerry Holland explaining how the process works. So this is really kind of the last thing that we will be seeing as part of this process here in Duval County. Live at the Supervisor of Elections office, Ashley Harding, Channel 4, the local station.
Ashley, we've been getting a lot of direction here, so our attention is divided. Have you talked about, are there any issues, anybody talking about any glitches that have happened throughout the night here? Jerry Holland mentioned.
Yeah, I did ask him. He did talk about that this evening. He said overall it's been a very smooth election day. The one hiccup was, we reported this earlier this afternoon around 1 o'clock-ish. There was that suspicious package at one of the precincts. It was the one on West Beaver Street. Thankfully, it only had to be closed for about 45 minutes or so. They were able to get back open and people were able to continue voting. Otherwise, he says it's been a very smooth day.
Great. All right. Ashley Harding reporting live from the Duval Supervisor of Elections office.
All right. We've got an election alert for you right now. Several states coming in that have been called for both candidates earning some more electoral votes tonight. In Louisiana, we understand that this is being called for former President Donald Trump. There are 8 electoral votes for him there.
All right. Let's take a look at North Dakota. 3 electoral votes. The projected winner, Donald Trump, as well.
South Dakota, similarly going to the former president, and also with 3 electoral votes.
All right, now let's take a look at Wyoming. That is being called for Donald Trump by the Associated Press. 3 electoral votes there.
All right, we want to look at Ohio. This used to be a swing state, and it is pretty red tonight. 17 electoral votes for former President Donald Trump, and we can look a little bit deeper at the numbers. 54% of the vote there in Ohio going for the former president.
That's right. And let's also take a look at New York. The projected winner going to Kamala Harris. 28 electoral votes being projected there. Taking a look at the electoral map.
Yeah.
Those numbers are racking up.
270 to win. Former President Trump has 137 so far. Vice President Harris 99. And we continue to watch for some of those key swing states and what's happening there. We're watching some of the results come in, and certainly as we get closer and more information there, we'll be talking with our roundtable and diving in a little deeper to the numbers there, county by county, and some of the swing states too.
And one of those swing states is Georgia. We're going to go visit Ariel Schiller, who is at the Glenn County, one of the precincts you were at before. Where are you now, Ariel?
Joy, I'm at the Board of Elections right now, and they actually just counted their final provisional ballots, so people are getting ready to go home. Some people have already left. We could see right now that they're kind of just wrapping up, putting away equipment and things of that nature. But I've been told by one of the staff members here that over the next few days, they'll have some more procedural stuff to do, but they're basically done counting votes, which is good news. But earlier today, if you'll take a look at what we saw at the precincts that we saw, there weren't a whole lot of voters going in and out of the precincts. We just saw a couple of voters here and there. The busiest was at one of the parks that has a voting precinct. But we did talk with people saying that it was an easy process, about 5 to 7 minutes. I spoke with one gentleman about why it was so important for him to vote on Election Day. Why was it so important for you to vote on Election Day?
For me? Well, I just want to make sure that we get the right parties in the office. That's really it. I know both parties want to do well, but you know, I just want to choose the people who I think is going to do the best for our community, basically.
And I did speak with some of the communications people from Glenn County about the law enforcement that was outside of the precincts today. They said that that was just normal procedure. It wasn't in response to anything in Fulton County. But we're going to talk with the staff here at the Board of Elections and see if there were any issues today or anything else that we can report later on tonight. Reporting live in Glenn County, Ariel Schiller, Channel 4, the local station.
And Ariel, I'm curious about that, the stuff that we heard about in Fulton County and some of the disruptions to elections. Was any of that part of the conversation with folks who are either voting or counting votes tonight as you've been talking to people there in Southeast Georgia?
Thankfully, from what I heard from the communications people here in Glynn County, they didn't have similar issues that they had in Fulton County. But again, they just had law enforcement at those voting precincts just as a precaution and to make sure that everything was safe at those voting precincts. Back to you.
Yeah, safety certainly a big part of what everyone was concerned with when we heard about that today. Ariel, thank you very much.
All right, we're still waiting for Georgia overall, so let's check in with John Esteemed. He's got a county-by-county breakdown. What's happening so far?
Well, right now we're looking at 68% of the total votes, 18% of the precincts reporting. Donald Trump jumping out to a 52.5% majority vote lead. He's got 1.9 million votes to Harris's 1.7 million. The difference between the two is 208,000. And what we were really planning on looking at tonight is this key Atlanta metro area. What we saw back in 2020, and I'll even pull up the results, was just a lot of mail-in votes and a lot of grassroots organizations, especially in Fulton County, getting people who would not regularly register to vote, get out and register to vote. So it made a difference in Fulton County. What we're seeing tonight is Harris has 72.6% of the votes. Donald Trump behind 202,000 there in Fulton County. It looks about the same percentage from what we saw in 2020, but again, it's the Atlanta area, it's the suburb areas and communities like Clayton County. Harris winning that county 84.6% of the votes, doing about the same that Biden did back in 2020. So we're still waiting on the Fayette counties. It appears that Donald Trump is winning there tonight with 51% of the votes. He did about the same in 2020, and Harris winning in Spalding County. Well, actually, we're not showing any results there for 2024, so I guess we're waiting on those results. That's really just kind of how Georgia is panning out tonight. Another area that we're looking at is Muskogee County. It looks like Harris doing well there at 39,000 votes. She's got 62%. So Georgia as a whole, it is still very early, again, 66% of the votes, but it's something that we'll certainly be keeping our eye on.
All right, thank you, John. Another election alert right now. Another state has been called, and that is the state of Texas. 40 electoral votes, and as expected, the projected winner here is going to be Republican Donald Trump.
All right, we are taking a look closer at the numbers here. Donald Trump, 54% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 45%. A difference of 666,000 votes. So yes, once again, those 40 electoral votes going in Donald Trump's pot. Taking a look at the electoral map now.
Yeah, 270 to win, we keep talking about. So Donald Trump up to 177 votes. So he needs 93 more, and there are 262 available. All right, as we follow this national presidential campaign, we stay in Florida to cover it tonight.
That's right. We're going to go meet up with Michael Yoshida, who is at Donald Trump's event that's happening at the Palm Beach Convention Center. Michael.
Hey, good evening. Yeah, glad to be back with you guys. We're here at Trump headquarters at the Palm Beach Convention Center. You can probably hear the noise in the room. We have several thousand of the former president supporters packed in here, expected to potentially even grow to a larger number as the night goes on. They're watching some of those early results start to roll in, the excitement building, the anticipation building, because we know at some point this evening the expectation is that the former president will make the journey over from Mar-a-Lago, short distance away, and speak to the supporters. We're told by aides to the former president that'll happen even if there is no official outcome to this presidential election. But again, as of now, he's still over there with those close friends, close family members. That includes RFK Jr. They're watching the results roll in while the former president also makes calls to radio stations across the country, continuing to urge people to get out and make their vote if they are in line, to stay in line so that their ballots will be cast and their vote will count this presidential election.
Michael, as election night continues here, how is the former president spending his time? I know he's at Mar-a-Lago and he's going to come to the convention center eventually.
For For sure, yeah. We know he's over there at Mar-a-Lago. Like I just talked about, he's been making calls to radio stations, been taking part in tele-rallies. The big focus, according to his campaign, obviously is, sounds cliche, but turnout. In an election that potentially was going to be historically close, a big focus on that turnout. One reason being they did things a little differently this time. They outsourced a lot of their ground game to other political organizations, whether that be Elon Musk, Super PAC, Charlie Kirk, and a lot of that effort was focused on young voters, particularly young men, trying to get them energized, get them registered, and now the big test, did that energizing, did that registering turn out in them actually showing up at the polls today, casting their ballots? So a big focus this evening on that turnout. That's why we continue even at this point in the evening seeing the former president make those calls, get the word out that he wants people to turn up and to stay in line again if they are at some of those later polls that are still open.
All right, Michael Yoshida joining us live from West Palm Beach. Michael, thank you.
In just a few moments, we're going to go to Washington, D.C. and hear from the reporter that's covering the Vice President Kamala Harris's watch party tonight. Let's come back to our roundtable for a moment. We're watching these different states, and some of those, most of them, are going as expected, but we've still got these swing states that we're watching.
Clearly, this has been going to script, but one state to keep an eye on, which is a surprise so far, it's still early, but Virginia. And Governor Youngkin in Virginia had said, wait and see, this is more competitive than you realize. And it is more competitive. You now have close to 70%, over 70% of the vote reporting, and Donald Trump up by 1. Now, again, you have some urban areas that are going to come in, can make a big difference. But that is a pretty significantly competitive state for Donald Trump. Donald Trump said he thought he'd be more competitive there. This is a very competitive race, and that's a state worth keeping an eye on.
You know, Democrats have been saying, we don't understand why this is not a lopsided race because they point to the baggage that former President Trump has. But at the other side, Republicans could also be looking at Vice President Harris and saying, why isn't this race lopsided in our candidate's favor? Because when you look at what's going on in the world, in Great Britain, in France, in Japan, in Australia, incumbent governments have been clobbered by the voters in their countries because the voters are very unhappy with the incumbent governments because of the economy. And the incumbent government here, people are pretty unhappy with the incumbent government. So a lot of people are saying, why is this election close?
Well, I think that is the two biggest headwinds that the vice president faces, Tom, to your point, are inflation, which people have not felt in a significant way for 40 years in this country. And as Mara Liasson from NPR often says, inflation is the killer of presidencies, that it can really damage the incumbent party, as you've seen around the world. The other issue is Joe Biden is a very unpopular incumbent right now, partially because of the inflation issue. So if she is not successful tonight, I think those headwinds, consistent with some of those results around the world, will be big factors in that.
Yeah, but I think it also means, going to the other side of the equation, that the reason why the race is still close with those headwinds, it should be lopsided, is because of the personality and character of Donald Trump. I think that's the reason why the race is as close as it is. A lot of people who have been voting today and exit polling and so forth and so on, interviews, they were saying, you know what, even though I like his policies, I just want somebody who my kids can look up to. I think a lot of it equals out because of his personality, and particularly this last week, he's gotten very, very personal in his attacks.
And yet a lot of the conversation is on the other side too. Well, I'm going to have to ignore the personality because I want the policies and that sort of thing.
Yes.
I mentioned a moment ago we wanted to go to Washington, D.C. We got a chance to do that now.
That's right. Let's go and join up with Julia Benbrook. She is standing by at Howard University, where Kamala Harris is watching the night unfold. Julia.
Well, the party has already started here at Howard University, and you can see that the stage is set behind me. This is a historic candidacy. She is the first black woman and first Asian American to lead a major party ticket. If she wins tonight, she will be the first female president as well. And there's been a lot of student participation. Howard is a historically black university here in Washington, D.C. It's also the vice president's alma mater. And we had Miss Howard University. She sang the national anthem. The Divine Nine strolled. And we heard from the Howard Gospel Choir. They sang Oh Happy Day and really had this entire crowd dancing along with them, striking that optimistic tone. And that's been what Harris has tried to do on the campaign trail in recent days, is strike an optimistic, forward-looking message. Here's a bit more of what she said in recent days.
Our campaign has tapped into the ambitions and the aspirations and the dreams of the American people. We are optimistic and excited about what we will do together, and we here know it is time for a new generation of leadership in America.
And you can hear some of the cheers behind me. They're bringing in some of the live stream here. So anytime good news comes in from Harris, you get that reaction. Now, speaking with some people here, they're cautiously optimistic. A few people I spoke with, they're really hopeful was the word that they used to describe coming into the night, but eager to see some real results here.
All right, Juliette Benbrook, appreciate your live report tonight there in Washington, D.C.
All right, we'll be going back and forth there to Florida, West Palm, all through the night. Folks, stick with us. Our election coverage continues for Vote 2024.
And as we continue in this 9 o'clock hour, let's take another look at the Electoral College votes so far. This is the big map where we're tracking 270 to win.
Sorry, I'm fascinated by this map.
You're looking at the map, which is what I want everyone to do right
177
now.
for Donald Trump right now, 99 electoral votes for Harris. What I'm looking at are all of these states outlined in yellow. Those are all of the states we are waiting to be called, the swing states that are going to have a huge impact here in the race tonight. Here in Florida, the race for Senate, that was called about an hour ago.
Yeah, taking a look at the latest results in the race between incumbent Republican Rick Scott and Democrat Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. Senator Scott is re-elected. He's got 56% of the votes versus 43% for the former Congresswoman. Now let's go to News4JAX reporter Ann Maxwell in Bonita Springs, where Rick Scott is gathered with supporters. Ann?
The party here is still going, as you can hear, but it has winded down a bit since the senator made his acceptance speech about an hour ago. He spoke briefly. He thanked his family, thanked his campaign staffers, his voters. You can see lots of people still out here hanging out, celebrating this win for the Republican Party in Florida tonight. The senator ran on a platform of making America more like Florida when it comes to things like education, when it comes to crime and safety. He wants to severely limit the size of the federal government, and he suggests suggested that his ambitions are even greater than this win tonight. Take a listen to what he had to say earlier.
Our work is not done. Next week, we have another election. Senate Republican leader.
Now, 2 years ago, Senator Scott did challenge Mitch McConnell for that position. It sounds like he's going to be going for that once again. He said there are problems in Washington that the Republican Party needs to fix, and he said Florida is the center of the Republican Party in the United States right now. Reporting live in Bonita Springs, Ann Maxwell, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, Ann Maxwell, thanks so much for your reporting tonight. We'll be back in check with you in a little bit.
All right, and tonight, Debbie Mucarsel-Powell is with her supporters in Miami.
Let's go to Tiffany Salome. She is standing by right now. Tiffany?
Yeah, sounds like it's a lot quieter here in Miami. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell spoke to reporters shortly after she took to the podium and talked to her supporters. She said, obviously, this is not the election she wanted, and she's thankful for the opportunity and for all of the Floridians who showed up and voted today. But she says the fight is not over, and she says there's still work to be done.
We have a lot of issues in the country overall. I think it's not just a party issue. I think it's a lack of information to our voters. I met so many students and people all across the state that didn't know that we had down ballot races, that didn't know enough about the amendments, that didn't know about the Senate race and what that means for them. We need to do a better job of giving information to voters so that they can make the right decisions.
Mucarsel-Powell was also asked what's next for her. Jokingly, she says she's going to Disney and taking a vacation. Reporting live in Miami tonight, Tiffany Salome, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, Tiffany, thanks so much. All right, we want to take a quick look at the results in our U.S. House races across Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia.
Yeah, in Florida, we're going to start with District 3. It includes Baker, Columbia, Bradford, Union, and Alachua counties, and some others in North Central Florida. But if you look at the results, incumbent Republican Kat Kamek, she won a third term, defeating Democrat Tom Wells handily, winning 62% of the vote.
Florida's 4th district, that includes Nassau and Clay counties, and the part of Duval County that's north and west of the St. Johns River. Taking a look at the results, Republican Aaron Bean won a second term, defeating Democrat LaShonda L.J. Holloway 57% to 43%.
And District 5 includes the rest of Duval County, nearly all of the area south and east of the St. Johns River, and the upper half of St. Johns County down to the St. Augustine area. Republican John Rutherford won a 5th term in Congress, easily defeating Jay McGovern, an engineer. 63% of the vote for Rutherford.
Going now to House District 6. It includes the rest of St. Johns County, plus Putnam and Flagler counties and other counties heading towards Central Florida. Looking at the results, Republican Michael Walz, he won a 4th term on Capitol Hill easily. He faced a challenge from Democrat James Stockton III. He is a pastor in Ocala.
All right, Southeast Georgia, we're not forgetting you. In the 1st Congressional District, that includes most of Southeast Georgia, stretches all the way up to Savannah and the state line with South Carolina. In this race, Republican Congressman Buddy Carter won a 6th term, defeating Democrat Patty Hewitt, a business consultant. Buddy Carter, the pharmacist, with 70% of the votes coming in tonight.
All right, we do have an election alert. I believe right now we are taking a look at Nebraska, a partial results coming in for Nebraska. Let's take a look at that. The projected winner right now, Donald Trump, with 3 electoral votes. But again, we are waiting for the rest.
Yeah, it's a little different in the state of Nebraska there in terms of the whole state, and it's by congressional districts and that sort of thing. So we'll zero in on that as we can as well. Looking at the big map here, 178 electoral votes for former President Trump. Vice President Harris has 99 so far in the county.
All right, keep it right here, folks. We are just getting started at 9:30 at night.
It's election night.
It is. We are here for you for the long haul. Stay with us. We are back after the break. Welcome back. Taking a look at our countdown clock as we wait for polls in a handful of states to close at 10 p.m. That's also when the key swing state of Arizona will release its first results after polls there closed at 9 p.m. our time.
Local Democrats and Republicans, they gathered tonight waiting to see how the race for president and the other key races across the states turn out.
News4JAX reporters Janice Harris and Alicia Hatcher, they are with the two parties at their parties. We're going to begin with Janice at the Duval Democrats gathering in St. Nicholas. Janice?
Well, you know, Joy, it does look and sound like a party, indeed a watch party, even though some of the local candidates have not necessarily won their races. So, for instance, LaShonda Holloway, she is here, and also Jay McGovern are here, and they have been supported by those that did vote for them. We've seen them walking through here. Also, a lot of local individuals that are within politics, also some council persons as well, have been here this evening. But within the room, people remain very optimistic. And as you hear right now, you can see, as you are seeing the update for Kamala Harris for New York, folks are doing this throughout the night. This is the part that makes it very exciting here at this watch party. Every time there's an update, whether it's 5% of the polls are in, or precincts are in, or it's 50%, it doesn't matter. Whenever they see anyone that is a Democrat winning at anything, even if it's not the final tally, there's a lot of what you're hearing, cheering and clapping hands and excitement. And it's been that way all night. So definitely a very festive, fun type of energy here. Now, I've talked to a lot of people here, young voters, old voters, but there was one voter in particular, and it's always very interesting when you talk to them. It was her first time voting at 19 years old. When I talked to her, she said there were many reasons as to why she decided that she was going to vote. Some of the reasons she decided to vote specifically for was Amendment 4. She said it was important for her to get her voice out there and say what she felt about Amendment 4, and that was one of the main reasons, one of the catalysts for her to get out and vote. She also just talked about the fact that she was excited about voting as a woman in the United States at 19 years old. So there are many reasons why people have decided to vote, but making sure that they get out to the polls was a big important thing for that young lady and so many other people that are here tonight. Still a very exciting, energetic type of energy that's happening in this room. People are going to stay here as long as they possibly can to watch and see what the results are on a national level, as they still have hope that there will be someone in the White House that is a Democrat. Back to you.
Yeah, Janice, that's one of the things I find interesting is that the party is still going on because the state of Florida, we're seeing, is not very competitive for Democrats in a lot of the major races there. But yeah, the Duval County, very close. Is that part of the reason that they are all engaged, enthusiastic, still going when on the broad plain, Florida didn't look like it was a very good night for Democrats?
Exactly, Kent. The people that are in this room tonight say that they are relentless and they are diehard. They're going to stay here no matter what till the very end when it comes specifically to the Harris-Walz campaign. Very supportive of her and saying that they've done a lot of the hard work on the ground to try to get people engaged in the voting process, to get out and vote. You heard from the Duval County chairman earlier, Daniel Henry, talking about how he had been up since 6 a.m. trying to make sure that people were engaged in the voting process, getting to the polls, and having their say by voting today. So it's still a very exciting night for the Democrats here at their watch party. And as I mentioned, they are still very hopeful. Back to you, Ken.
All right, Janice, I know it's going to be a long day for a lot of us, especially Daniel Henry, if he got up at 6 a.m. this morning. Janice Harris reporting live for us from St. Nicholas.
All right, let's check in now with the Duval GOP. They're downtown. Alicia Hatcher is standing by there. Alicia?
Joy, the high energy continues here at at the Duval GOP. Dean Black is currently on the stage. He just invited a city council member on stage to speak. They have been announcing local and state Republican winners. The energy has been high here. You see a guy walking by with a flag on there. Everyone has on hats. I've been speaking with people here who are excited and are confident that Trump will win. They say if Trump wins, they want him to focus on some particular issues like lowering grocery prices, gas prices, and also close the border. I did also speak with Dean Black, and here's what he had to say.
We're looking at the congressional races. We're looking at the battle for the Senate. Of course, we're looking at the presidency. And for voters in Northeast Florida, well, you should be looking at down ballot races too. And we have a lot of those.
People are still speaking here throughout the evening. Dean Black did say they'll be here until about midnight, but the party is still going on here. We're now reporting live. Alicia Hatcher, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, Alicia Hatcher, thank you.
All right, election night and Vote 2024 continues. We don't want you to go anywhere. We're watching all of it for you tonight.
where Democrat Senator Sherrod Brown faces a challenge from Republican businessman Bernie Moreno. And as you can see here, Bernie Moreno is leading with 51% of the votes. Now to Michigan, in the open Senate seat there with Democrat Debbie Stabenow retiring, we've got Democratic Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin versus former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers. And so far, Slotkin is winning with 53% of the votes. That's just with 5% reporting, however. So this is going to fluctuate as we monitor those numbers. Democrat Bob Casey is running for re-election in the presidential swing state of Pennsylvania. He faces Republican Dave McCormick, a former hedge fund CEO. With 31% of the precincts reporting, Bob Casey is right now winning with 52% of the vote. And in Wisconsin, where polls closed at 9 o'clock, Democrat Tammy Baldwin is defending her seat against Republican Eric Hovde, a bank CEO. This is just with 22% of the precincts reporting, and it's pretty tight here. Tammy Baldwin with 50% of the votes and Eric Hovde with 48%. Let's take you to the great state of Texas. Republican Senator Ted Cruz is seeking re-election against Democratic Congressman Colin Allred. 6 years ago, Cruz narrowly won re-election against another Democratic Congressman, Beto O'Rourke, in a race that got nationwide attention. This is with 64% of the precincts reporting. Ted Cruz is leading right now, 53% to Allred's 45%. Now, as we monitor the Senate, we are also keeping an eye on the House. All 435 seats are up for election, though there are a handful where candidates are unopposed. Going into tonight, Republicans do hold a narrow majority. 218 seats are needed for control. With the races that have been called so far, it stands right now with Republicans at 102 and Democrats at 72. We will be monitoring all this and be bringing you the results throughout the night. Back to you, Kent and Joy.
All right, thank you, Stacey. And we continue to get insight into the issues and beliefs that motivated voters in the presidential race.
Tarek Miner and Scott Johnson joining us now with data from the AP VoteCast survey of voters. Tarek and Scott, some interesting breakdowns you got.
Yeah, this is all stuff that, all issues that have been impacting voters. The legal cases against Donald Trump, the fight for free speech, inflation and high prices, just some of the factors that drove Georgians and Floridians to the polls this year.
And after the assassination attempt of former President Trump, right before the Republican National Convention, the former president got a big bump in the polls, and now we're seeing if that was a factor for voters. Let's look at some of the numbers here. So this was a question on whether or not the assassination attempts against Trump influenced your vote. Was a factor. 68% of Florida voters say it was a factor. 31% say not a factor. But let's check in Georgia what it looked like. Kind of similar, 67-30. So pretty strong factor in their vote was the assassination attempts against the former president.
The former president has been convicted of several felonies. The legal cases against Donald Trump, were they a factor for voters in the state of Florida? 70% of the voters said yes, this was a factor. 29% saying that it was not a factor. Now let's take a look at the state of Georgia, where you see the numbers pretty much mirror almost the same amounts. 69% of voters saying that was a factor, the legal cases against Donald Trump, and 30% saying not a factor.
And look at this. This is a big deal for people. Future of free speech, 95-4 in Florida. This is a big issue for voters in Florida. In Georgia, we are seeing similar numbers, same numbers exactly, actually, 95-4 once again. So actually free speech, we don't talk about it a lot in headlines, but this is a big issue for a lot of voters.
And the biggest issue, perhaps, 97% of Florida voters say that one of the main factors for them going to the polls is the price of inflation. High prices from the grocery store to the price of gas to everyday living. And then if you go to the state of Georgia, you see 97% of the voters there, again, agreeing that this, and I believe these are the highest numbers as far as we've seen as the factor that drove them to the polls. So this obviously a big driver.
Another issue that got some interest but not as much, we're talking January 6th, whether or not Trump had responsibility for January 6th. In Florida, 42% said a lot. Some at 22, 35% not at all. So that was a little more across the board
a little closer to even, but it wasn't like 95.2 like we saw in inflation. So it did bear something, but not to the overwhelming amount that it seems to have cost him the race in Florida. Let's check Georgia, which is still in play right now. Pretty much the same. Florida and Georgia voters seem to be right in line on a lot of these issues. A lot at 41%, 23% some. As far as January 6th, 35% a factor, not at all.
All of these big issues, and we're curious to see how our roundtable of experts and what they think about all of these factors that we've been talking about, quite frankly, for months leading up to Election Night.
Certainly a lot going on. We're going to send it back to you guys.
All right, Scott, Tarek, thank you very much as we bring in our roundtable. Let's talk about some of these things. We already discussed that certainly inflation and economy, Chris, you brought that up in our last hour, that was such a key issue in this campaign. What do you think about some of these other things that Tarek and Scott are pointing out?
I'm reminded of the words made immortal by Bill Clinton when he was running for president against George H.W. Bush. He said, "It's the economy, stupid." And do you see how many people are concerned about inflation? The price of eggs gone from $1.69 to $3.99. Every time you go into the grocery store and you pick up those eggs, who do you think of? President Biden? Who do you blame? You got to blame somebody. Because it's not your fault that the eggs have gone up to $3.99, right? So who are you going to blame? The president.
Is there any legitimacy to the folks who say, well, it's not President Biden's fault either. We had a pandemic. We had all these things that were going on. What do you think about that?
I think I mean, a lot of times people get caught up into, messaging. The reality is there was a pandemic. I was on the Port Authority board when that was going on, and we could see what was going on in the trade lanes from, Europe and from Asia, and how we had to adjust and so forth and so on. And the people were getting sick at the docks. They couldn't load the ships. People who had owner of the ships lines didn't have as many employees because they were sick. They couldn't get the stuff over to other parts of the country. 95% of commerce comes from across water. So naturally what happens? Supply and demand. Prices go up. Biden didn't do that. I mean, that was the pandemic. And the question has to be, how was the pandemic handled? And a lot of people blame Trump on how it was mishandled. So people will definitely want to blame. You can't get mad at an economy. You get mad about it. You have to be mad at a person. So they personalize it to President.
That's what people do. That explanation's too complicated for the person buying the eggs.
Yeah.
Well, and the
but
problem,
it's still the truth.
Well, and voters have very short memories, right? Yep. Donald Trump left office in January of 2021. For most of his presidency, prior to when the pandemic occurred in 2020, I think there's a tendency at times to remember some of the good economic times that may have existed, and I think that influences voters. Even though John is exactly right, inflation is a very complicated issue with a variety of different layers to it. But Tom, you're also right in the sense that people don't necessarily, they're busy, they have lots of things going on in their life, don't have time to do that analysis, so there's just sort of a reflexive reaction against who's ever in power during tough economic times, and perhaps in their favor during good economic times. What's interesting is so many economic statistics right now are very positive. Unemployment, jobs being added, but as we talked about earlier, as Marla Elias from NPR said, inflation ends presidencies, and it is a very powerful issue.
Yeah, we go to Tom's point about inflation, and I'll talk about Chris's too. I'll separate inflation and the economy, although they're both related, of course. Joe Biden has tried to make the case, of course, hey, look at the economy. It's better than you think because unemployment's low, the stock market is up, GDP is up. But let me separate that with inflation. The inflation that's 20% over the last 4 years, more than we've had in 40 years. And I'll take a little bit of exception with John. I'll agree with him that there are multiple causes. But Larry Summers warned, the former Treasury Secretary for Bill Clinton, that the multi-trillion-dollar spending package from Joe Biden was going to contribute. And some economists, of the 8 to 9% of increase of inflation, attribute about half of that to extra spending. That includes the $2 trillion Build Back Better plan. That includes the Anti-Inflationary Act, the Green New Deal Act of close to $2 trillion. You had lots and lots of spending. You also had supply bottlenecks. You also had global inflation. You had lots of different factors coming in. But I'll go to Tom's bottom line. if you're an American couple to now, if you're an elderly person and you're looking to retirement, you may not be able to retire because of inflation. If you're a younger person and you're trying to buy a house, you may not be able to buy a house because of inflation. If you go to the grocery store, you are literally getting sticker shock. Right. And when they talk about inflation coming down, what they're really talking about is the rate coming down. That 20% increase is a permanent loss of wealth.
When will my eggs be $1.69?
Well, but it's a real.
Never again. Never again, right?
It is a real challenge for American people casting votes. They look at inflation and they take a look at what happened before, and they look at this and they say that's why in that vote cast it was #1, because inflation affects people every day when they fill up their gas tank, when they buy groceries, when they try to buy a house. Now, many people, of course, are doing well in the stock market. The economy, low unemployment is low. That's all true. But for your everyday American, this inflation is a really big deal. I think Tom's point's really well taken.
Chris? Well, I just think a couple of points. First of all, I don't think the Inflation Reduction Act was known as the Green New Deal. That was something completely separate from that particular bill. So just want to clarify that. But even beyond that, look, there are some markers in the economy that show that inflation is dissipating from its high. A big one is the Federal Reserve cut interest rates, which they would not have done but for sort of a positive trend in the inflation
after
standpoint.
Raising interest rates.
Well, that's right. Now, I think here's the problem, to Rick's point. Things that happened relatively recently, people don't necessarily feel those for a little while. What they do remember is sort of the pandemic-created inflationary period where their prices went up. So some of those positive changes just take a while to kind of be built in to people's thinking about the economy and their thinking about the electorate. So I do want to be clear about where sort of the inflation issue is going and where it stands in the minds of voters. Those can be two very different things.
Yeah, it's a good point. I will point out, by the way, in the last couple of weeks, boy, gas prices have gone down. And somebody asked me, hey, is somebody trying to make a point and saying, hey, the economy looks better because you're not paying as much for gas prices? But yeah, a lot of the inflationary things, those prices, they're never really going to come down, even if the rate of inflation stops growing or comes down.
I believe we have an election alert. We want to show Missouri. Right now, the Associated Press is calling Missouri for Donald Trump. So 10 electoral votes look like they will be going into Donald Trump's pot. So if we want to take a look at that electoral map, 188 electoral votes to Harris's 99. And I'm looking at Georgia. This is what I heard from Tarek and Scott when they were taking a look at those breakdown of demographics. A lot of those numbers that they were talking about in Florida mirrored Georgia. So we know how Florida has voted. Does this mean we kind of sort of know how Georgia's going? No?
No, I mean, two completely different states. And there's still, Joy, right now, just over 1 million votes out in the state of Georgia. It looks like former President Trump leads by a couple 100,000 votes with 1 million votes out. Some of those kind of from the metro Atlanta area. So very different dynamics. Florida does not have a dominant metro area like Atlanta that is the source of a very large number of Democratic votes. Also doesn't have a Democratic turnout infrastructure like the state of Georgia. So there's a lot of dynamics in Georgia, like we actually talked about last night. Georgia is the new Florida to some extent in terms of being a swing state. There's a lot of factors there that cause that to happen, just simply don't exist in Florida anymore.
Tom, before we run out of time, let me get your perspective on this. I know one of the things that we talked about in the votecast was that free speech was a factor. So many people said they're concerned about free speech, but both sides have been claiming that the other party is responsible for censorship or for taking away the possibility of free speech in our country.
I frankly found that exit poll, I found that surprising. I'd like to know, I'd like to quiz those people myself, wouldn't you, as to what do you mean about your concern about free speech? The campaign that we have been through, the speech has been freer than any campaign I've ever covered. It's extraordinary, the things that have been said.
Yeah, it's wild in a lot of ways.
Some of us might wish that we could kind of, rein ourselves in a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
What did Archie say? Stifle yourself?
We're almost out of time for this hour, but guess what? We still got a lot more to do. Don't go anywhere. Our coverage of Election Night 2024 continues.
the local station. The 10 o'clock news starts now.
Right now at 10, this is where the race to 270 stands as we cross 10 o'clock in the evening Eastern time. We've got 99 Electoral College votes for Vice President Kamala Harris so far, 188 for former President Donald Trump. And now that it is 10 p.m., polls have closed in these green states out west. You can see them there: Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, and Utah. And this is also the time when the battleground state of Arizona will start releasing its results. Polls closed an hour ago. Results aren't really released until 10 p.m. And then looking to 11 o'clock, far left coast, we'll be counting down to California, Oregon, and Washington. And quite a few states tonight have already been called. It doesn't seem to be any upsets on either side so far.
Here in Florida, which saw 1 million new registered Republicans for this election cycle, both Amendments 3 and 4 did not have enough votes to pass. And for the presidency, Florida has been called for Donald Trump, which gives him 30 of his electoral votes.
Let's take a look at the presidential vote count in the key swing state of Georgia. They're still counting votes there after a tumultuous election day. You can see what the numbers look like right now. Meanwhile, there in Georgia, 32 polling locations today received bomb threats. And as a result, voting hours were extended at some of the locations, ranging from 10 minutes to 45 minutes. And we heard from one poll worker about all that chaos.
I've been doing the elections, and I've never seen anything like it. This year has been the worst time for us as a country to be voting. I've never seen anything so ridiculous in all my life.
We have a team of reporters across our area and across the state, as well as up in Georgia tonight, following key races and the vote counting process. We will have live reports from them over the next hour.
We want to reintroduce our roundtable of esteemed guests as well. News4JAX political analyst and Shercliffe executive director of the Jacksonville University Public Policy Institute. That's a mouthful. Rick Mullaney is here with us. We're also joined by government law attorney and author Chris Hand, former chief of staff for the city of Jacksonville.
Pastor and political contributor John Newman, and joining us for his 16th presidential election, longtime News4JAX anchor Tom Wills, who just stepped away from the anchor desk this past May. Where we stand right now is that we are still waiting for these swing states. Still nothing so far, but we're gleaning a little bit of what's happening, but no surprises here tonight.
Not a one. We're still in suspense.
Still waiting.
It's going to be a long night. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's going to be a long night. They're all performing as we expected they would. Certainly, Michigan, the blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And I agree with what my colleagues have said all night: Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. It's going to be Pennsylvania. But with the caveat, if not Virginia, but North Carolina and Georgia, if they go one way or the other for one of those candidates, it does portend that they will probably win the election.
Which is still early, but it looks like they're going the way of the former president, both North Carolina and Georgia, right?
Well,
I mean, I'm not willing to call them, but I mean, all night long he's been leading.
I think it's still too early to call, just because there are votes, particularly from big urban areas. Mecklenburg County and the Charlotte area are in North Carolina, DeKalb County and other counties around Metro Atlanta, Gwinnett County. So it is still
That's what the audience needs to hear from you guys. They're looking at the numbers and saying,
but it's true.
My candidate's losing, my candidate's winning.
Well,
that's where the votes are coming from.
Yeah, these early numbers they don't tell us the full picture. That's why we really need to wait, particularly in states where it's going to be very close.
Well, at the very beginning of our broadcast tonight, we said early in the night one of the things we'd look to would be Georgia and North Carolina, and where Donald Trump needed to hold serve, so to speak. He needed to win both of those states. And as Tom points out, at least preliminarily, and Chris rightfully points out there's more to go, but Donald Trump does have a lead at the moment in both North Carolina and Georgia, which was the big point we made earlier. If that's the case, then it really looked to that big blue wall, because for Donald Trump, his most direct pathway to 270 is North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania has 19 electoral votes. Of the 93 electoral votes in those 7 swing states, it is the big prize. And of the 3 in the blue wall, it is the one where Donald Trump is the most competitive. The other one is Wisconsin, and then I'd put in third place maybe Michigan. Right now, if you're looking at the polling, Donald Trump has a very slight lead in Wisconsin, and again, that's early. He's got those early leads going in Georgia and in North Carolina. But Also at the beginning of the program, we said this varies a lot because those populated urban areas where Kamala Harris does well, you have to wait for them to report. Certainly in Pennsylvania, where you have Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, in Michigan, where you have Detroit, and of course we get out west for Phoenix.
Yeah.
But early indicators, Donald Trump having a pretty good evening so far. If I were in the Trump camp, I'd be cautiously optimistic. But again, if you look to that big blue wall, it's still playing out the way we thought.
Yeah, so we do want to show you a couple of more states have been called tonight. And so we've got election alerts from the mountain time zone area there. The state of Montana tonight is being called in favor of former President Donald Trump. There are 4 electoral votes that will go in his column tonight.
And let's also take a look at the state of Utah. Donald Trump is the projected winner there by the Associated Press. 6 electoral votes going to Donald Trump. Do we want to take another look at the electoral map now that those 2 states have been called? So we are at 198 for Donald Trump, 99 for Harris.
All right, so tonight, much of the attention in the race for president is on those key swing states, 7 of them, none of which have been called yet.
Here's a look at all those states we've been talking about a lot tonight already. Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And in Arizona, we have an update. A judge has ordered polling places to remain open 2 extra hours in 9 precincts in eastern Arizona County after a rocky start to Election Day, which included malfunctioning equipment, a lack of printed ballots. But let's take a look at the results we do have so far in the states that closed earlier.
All right, so we're going to start with North Carolina, state with 16 electoral votes. And again, early enough that we're not sure where this is going to go. But at this point, Donald Trump is leading with 52% of the vote. He's 191,000 votes ahead.
And Pennsylvania, the state that we have been saying everything hinges on tonight. There are 19 electoral votes at stake right now. Donald Trump with 50% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 49%.
Very close,
yeah,
right?
Toss up.
Michigan, part of the blue wall there, 15 electoral votes. And the difference here is just 30,000 votes at this point. 51% of the voting coming in for Vice President Harris right now.
Gosh, and in Wisconsin, take a look. 10 electoral votes. Looks like it's pretty close there as well. Donald Trump, 50% of the vote, 48% for Kamala Harris, with a difference of a little less than 22,000 votes.
Yeah, you've heard the phrase before, every vote counts. Yes, it does, and that's what we're watching tonight. Here in Florida, there were a handful of races that were watched very closely across the state.
They include our U.S. Senate race and a pair of high-profile constitutional amendments. Starting with the race for U.S. Senate, Republican Rick Scott sought a second term against Democrat Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. He won that 56% to Debbie Mucarsel-Powell's 43%. And neither Amendment 3 or 4 tonight got enough of the votes to pass in Florida. Amendment 3 was to allow the use of recreational marijuana for adults. And there you see 56 said yes, 44% said no. But because that 56 is not 60, we need to reach that 60% threshold in order for the amendment to win. And Amendment 4 would have prohibited laws restricting abortion before fetal viability or when necessary to protect a pregnant woman's health. Also not passing.
And we want to go out to some of our reporters who are out in the field this evening.
Yes, let's take a look. We are going to go right now to a cruise in Georgia, as well as here locally in Duval County. News4JAX reporter Alicia Hatcher at the Duval GOP. But first, we are going to head to News4JAX reporter Janice Harris at the Duval Dems. That's in the St. Nicholas area. Janice.
Joy, even though this watch party is a watch party where they're talking about some of the local candidates that did not win, it really feels like a rally. I'll show you just for a brief moment. Folks have been speaking this entire time, talking about staying positive, staying focused, and also standing right next to me now, LaShonda L.J. Holloway. She's here now. How are you feeling about the race?
Well, I feel good. I mean, like I said, you know, I have a deep pride in our country, in this democracy, but I have an even greater pride for the people in this county who thought enough of me to vote for me. I mean, 162,000 votes is nothing to be sad about. 162,000 people. We know that the district is gerrymandered. We know that this district used to be a minority access district. And so, but for, look, the courts intervening, it is what it is, but it's certainly not a reflection on the kind of campaign and the kind of volunteers that we had.
You plan on running again?
Well, I mean, look, I don't know what the future holds, but I certainly know who holds the future, but you can count on me to always fight for a better day.
Thank you, Ms. Holloway. And then also it's important, I want to mention to you all, I talked to a couple of people about their reaction about the Democratic Party and some of the races that they did not win. Take a listen to what they had to say.
I'm really not happy because the same thing keeps occurring in this party, and it's just to the point where I'm a little disgusted, but also happy that we might see the first woman president. But you know, if things keep happening like this, where we're not winning races in the Democratic Party across Florida, we got a clean house. And that's just me being completely honest, because I've been around for a long time, and the people you want to win, we're not pushing hard enough for them to win. And that starts with me, everyone in the community, and the chairman of our of the Democratic Party. We have to do better, and it just keep happening. Like, Ms. Holloway deserved this seat, and you know, we're not doing enough to support her. She supports us, so why aren't we supporting her?
I think that when we move to our next portion of voting, that we need to be a lot more targeted with who we actually pick. And I think that the people that have ran their races, they did them well, they did everything that they could have done. But I just don't think that us as a city, when it comes to some of the Democratic Party choices, we don't give them the proper resources to do it. But also, if we made sure that the entire party was aware of the decisions prior to, I think there could be more preparation to make sure that we get them into the seats.
So a lot of opinions, a lot of commentary. The night is not even over. Just a lot of thoughts that you may even talk about in the roundtable from people here that are at this Duval County Democrat Watch Party. So now they're still staying energized and focused tonight with the hope that Harris Walz will take the seat for the White House. Reporting live in St. Nicholas, Janice Harris, Channel 4, the local station. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Janice Harris, for your live report.
All right. We also want to catch up with Alicia Hatcher. She is with the Duval GOP tonight. What's the energy been like downtown, Alicia?
Joy, the Duval County GOP Chairman Dean Black just came off the stage with the Neptune Beach mayoral-elect. He says that it was a clean sweep at the beaches for the mayoral race. There are still tons of people here just watching what's happening. They have Fox News on every TV screen. Those attending are excited for Amendment 2 passing, which is the right to fish and hunt. I also spoke with Black earlier, and I asked him what makes a third Trump run different here. And here's what he has to say.
Well, I think people have looked back wistfully and realized that, look, the guy actually governed well. He was put in a very unfair situation. He was mistreated. He was impeached. He was harassed. And he was just trying to help the American people.
There's some people here that live out at the beaches that are excited about this news. A lot of people here this evening, I did ask them, were they expecting these many wins? And they said that they were, and they're just hoping for the presidential win to come about. For now, reporting live, Alicia Hatcher, Channel 4, the local station.
Thank you, Alicia. And a look at the Electoral College votes for each candidate tonight.
The winner must have 270 as we start to get results in at the top of the hour. Take a look. Donald Trump has 198 electoral votes. Harris has 99. Still waiting for those key swing states. Stay with us. We are back after the break. California.
And speaking of states being called, we got an election alert for you right now. The state of Colorado is being called. It is a projected win for Vice President Harris and 10 electoral votes that will add to her total. We want to look at the big map that we're following for you tonight. Vice President Harris with 109 electoral votes so far. President Trump with 198. 270 is the magic number to win tonight.
We are going to take you now to Howard University. That is where Julia Benbrook is standing by at the Kamala Harris event. Julia.
Kamala Harris with 46.4% of the vote. Donald Trump with 250.
Joy and Kent, it has been a night full of enthusiasm so far, and you can hear the crowd kind of cheering as the projections are playing, as they're hearing some of the results roll in. But of course, still waiting on those 7 key battleground states. I'm here at Howard University. This is a historically black college in Washington, D.C., and it's also Vice President Kamala Harris's alma mater. So choosing to come here tonight is really a full circle moment for her. That's exactly how she described it during a radio interview this morning. This is where she ran her first campaign for freshman class representative. It's where she chaired the Economic Society and where she became a member of the AKA sorority, which was actually founded here at Howard in 1908. And we saw a lot of pink and green in the crowd representing that part of her life. Now, this is a historic candidacy. She is the first black woman and first Asian American to lead a major party ticket. And that's not something that she's talked about a ton on the campaign trail, instead allowing others to really detail those achievements. But tonight is an opportunity to highlight every part of her and her history here on this campus. In the Yard, one of the places she's described as one of her favorite places on campus in her memoir.
Sometimes there's that. Has a Republican governor since the last presidential election.
All right, Julia, yeah, I appreciate that. And as we're watching what you're watching tonight, we keep waiting for those swing states.
That's right. Any talk about seeing Kamala Harris come out at all?
It's something else. It's the surprise of the night so far in terms of how close it is, but it just flipped loose.
Well, as of right now, we know that she is watching the results roll in at her Naval Observatory residence. She is with family, but she's in constant contact with her campaign team in Delaware. And the words that an aide used to describe the mood was upbeat and optimistic, particularly in the turnout reports in those so-called blue wall battlegrounds, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But they know they are up for a long night ahead and a tough battle in those states as well.
All right, thanks for the insight there, Julia Benbrook, live at the campaign event.
Yeah.
At the watch party for Kamala Harris. Whew.
Doubling as a campaign event, yes. So we're going to go to one of those for the Republican nominee tonight, and we're staying here in Florida. Michael Yoshida is at the Donald Trump event at the Palm Beach Convention Center. Michael?
Hey, good evening, guys. Good to be back with you. A lot of energy here at Trump quarters at the Palm Beach Convention Center. Huge crowd gathered here in this room, several thousand at this point, if I had to guess, of supporters for the former president. A lot of energy in here. They've got several screens projecting different news stations spread out across the different walls. Can tell you, it's just a few minutes ago we heard some loud cheers, as you would expect when they show either some of those early projections or some of those updates on some of those key battleground states. A lot of excitement, also a lot of anticipation, of course, for the results, but also when they may see the former president. Right now, he's a short distance away at Mar-a-Lago with some close family and friends. But according to aides, we know even if there is no official outcome this evening, the expectation is at some point he will make his way over here, address his supporters. Of course, right now, we're just waiting to see when that happens.
Michael, you know, at a lot of Donald Trump's events, campaigning throughout, we've seen so many big names come and support both candidates. Are you seeing these big names show up here in West Palm?
For sure. So over the last few days since we've been here, we've seen some familiar faces in the GOP. Marjorie Taylor Greene. We also saw RFK Jr., in some of the areas we've been, some of the restaurants, hotels. We know this evening he's watching some of the early results roll in with the former president at Mar-a-Lago. So some of those names in the mix, we know, potentially going to make their way over here, remains to be seen. But yeah, a lot of excitement from those big names, big faces, whether they're in the GOP, maybe just supporters of the president in general, showing out and anxiously waiting to see what happens this evening.
Yeah, that's all of us anxiously waiting. Michael Yoshida, appreciate your report there. And polls here on the East Coast, they closed back at 7 p.m.
We have had crews out at the Duval Supervisor of Elections office where they're hard at work counting the votes. This is where we find News4JAX reporter Ashley Harding. Ashley, what are you hearing since the top of the hour?
Well, really, it's just seeing where things go from here. You know, it's been an interesting process, but it's so important to point out that, you know, all that equipment that they have at the polling locations, the thumb drives, the tapes, those important things, they do have to come back to the Supervisor of Elections office. And we're here in the warehouse portion of it. So I'm told there's a couple more trucks. This is one of them, I'm told. You see the yellow bags coming out. These are the things that are so crucial to this entire process. They go down this conveyor belt. They've got all these workers here. They inspect all of these items. They mark them. They label them. They make sure that they're accounted for because, you know, in the off event that there is a need for a recount, they don't need to try to track down these items. So this is a very important process, and it's been a really interesting day and, frankly, a very laid-back day. For the most part, it's been a really, really seamless day. That's what Jerry Holland was telling me, but we did report it. You know, Joy, you'll remember we sent out that push alert around 1 o'clock about that suspicious package at one of the polling locations. Thankfully, it only took about 40 minutes to clear everything up, and they were able to get back to business. But I did talk to Jerry Holland just a little while ago, and he was talking about voter turnout here in Duval County. He did tell me that he was hoping to see a higher turnout than what actually occurred. But this is what he told us just a little while ago.
Overall, I was expecting a higher turnout. I thought really this election was going to engage more voters than we saw in 2020, but about the same amount turnout, you know, about 74% is what we're looking at. You know, we were very fortunate that we had a record amount of people vote during the early voting days. That was good. It took pressure off Election Day. So we had a smooth Election Day with the exception of that one location that had a suspicious package.
And something else Jerry Holland was telling me is that they're always looking at ways to hear from the public, get some constructive feedback on how to make things even better than what they just had. And he said that they're always looking at that. And the energy in the room has been really interesting. You know, a lot of the people that have been here for many hours. I talked to a woman who says she's been here since 5 a.m. So it really goes to show you the dedication and hard work of these workers and these volunteers, these people making this process happen. But every time we hear a truck come by, they're still like, there's another truck, and it's a lot of excitement. And, you know, Jerry Holland said in the last hour here that they can't leave until the process is over. So it just goes to show you how important their job is. I'll send it back to you all. For now, we're live tonight. Ashley Harding, Channel 4, the local station.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, Georgia is one of the states that we are watching very closely tonight. This really is a battleground state.
You know, they had quite a few issues today in Fulton County with bomb threats pushing back the hours of some polling locations. Joining us now from Southeast Georgia is News4JAX reporter Ariel Schiller. She's at the Glenn County Supervisor of Elections office, I believe. Ariel?
Yeah, that's right, Joy. We're right outside the Board of Elections office. They're actually closed for tonight because they counted the final provisional ballot, and that was pretty much it. They had a little bit of things to wrap up, but then they closed up shop and turned off the lights. So they're gone for tonight. But we did catch that process of counting the final provisional ballot on camera earlier tonight, if you take a look at your screens. And, you know, it was a pretty interesting process just to see that they had to have representatives from each party to look at that provisional provisional ballot. But, you know, they said overall most of what happened today, it was pretty standard, and that they had about 72% of the electorate show up for this election, which was great because, you know, obviously they prepare for 100% of the electorate to show up, but they love when they see that many people show up to vote. And I spoke with Christina Redden, Assistant Director of Glynn County Board of Elections, just about what it means to see that many people show up. What does it mean from your position to be able to see that kind of turnout?
Well, we have to do all of this work preparing for 100% turnout. So when it's a low turnout, it's kind of disheartening that we did all of this stuff and nobody turned out. So it's really nice when it's a huge turnout, because then you kind of feel that the vote represents the people of the whole county. Like over 70% of the whole county voted, the people have spoken. And I think that that's important.
Now, earlier today when we were out at the polls, we only saw a couple of people trickling in and out of those polls today, but everyone we spoke with said it was an easy process, about 5 to 7 minutes. Christina Redden did tell me, though, that they had one issue with one precinct, I should say, and she said that they were able to extend a little bit of time for that because the issue, I think there was an issue with getting people checked in, but they were able to give people extra time to vote at that precinct today. But they will have, from this point on, a couple of procedural things for those provisional ballots, and then waiting for things like military ballots to come in. They just have to be postmarked by today to count. Reporting live in Glynn County, Ariel Schiller, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, so we want to take a look at Georgia right now at the moment. We've got 88% of the votes and 40% of the precincts reporting former President Donald Trump winning with 51% of the votes at over 2.4 million votes. But this is a razor-thin margin at the moment. Right now, the separation is just 151,000 votes. We're going to be taking a look at the Atlanta area, the Columbus area, Macon and Augusta. But we also want to bring in how Trump is doing versus how he did in 2020. Again, in 2020, this was historic. The first time this state had swung in 30 years. And what we know is there was a surge of voters here in Fulton County and Clayton County. People who normally weren't getting out and registering the vote did do that. There was a lot of grassroots organizations to be able to do that. What we're seeing tonight in Fulton County is Harris has 71.5% of the votes. Trump has 27.5%, the difference 210,000. So Trump looks like he's made a little bit of gain in Fulton County, but it's obviously still early. And let's see if we can, yeah, 82%, 0 of the precincts reporting there. And then moving south here to Clayton County, Harris with 84.3% of the votes, Trump with 15%. The difference, 77,000 votes. One thing I have been keeping my eye on is Jones County. We are still seeing 0 results coming out of Jones County. That was the case for a couple of these counties, but Jones County is still hanging on. And I was taking a look on my computer, and I don't see anything out of that state reporting anywhere. So that is certainly something we'll be keeping our eyes on. And as we're moving through Augusta here in that area, Burt County, Harris doing 72% of the vote there, Trump with 27%. The difference so slim, just 248 votes, obviously a little bit smaller of a county. Well, based on what we saw in 2020, those numbers could certainly accelerate and go up, but it was close then too with the separation there in 2020, only 192 votes. Let's swing over to Savannah. I'm sure folks are wondering how we are doing out there. Chatham County, Harris has 60% of the vote with 31,000 votes. Trump behind her with 11,000 votes. This is an area that Biden won in 2020 as well with 78,000 votes. Trump had 39% there. So it seems like we're going to be seeing a lot more votes coming in tonight. But Georgia, just as a whole, if I'm going to come back to our totals, checking in, we've got 88% of the vote, 43% of the precincts reporting. So this is still razor thin, 151,000 votes being the difference with Donald Trump in the lead. Let's take a look at some of these other counties. I believe Bartow County sits right in here. Trump has 75% of the vote. Back in 2020, he's improving upon that number, and he's already got more votes in this county than he did in 2020. And this state's not even called at this point. Let's see if that's 100%. Okay, yeah, so 100% of the precincts reporting there. So Trump did better in Bartow County, and if we move west, we should run into Carroll County. Trump did 71% of the votes in this county. The difference between the two candidates, 18,000 votes. Trump looks like he has done significantly better in this county, well, percentage-wise, but as far as votes, let's see how we're doing. 100% of the precincts reporting. So it looks like there's actually a little bit smaller of a turnout in Carroll County, but here in Georgia, we are still waiting on the total results, and 100% of the precincts reporting. Right now, it's just 43%. Lots to keep our eyes on tonight, and we will certainly do that.
All right, thank you, John. And we've got an election alert for you right now from the District of Columbia. This is being called in favor of the vice president, Kamala Harris, with 3 electoral votes there as the projected winner.
Yep. Do we want to take a look at the electoral map? We are now 112 electoral votes for Harris, 198 for Donald Trump. Still waiting for quite a few states, as well as those major swing states.
All right, looks like we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back. It's election night and Vote 2024 here on News4JAX. Thanks for staying with us. All right, and taking a look again at where the electoral map stands right now at 10:35 Eastern Time on election night and Vote 2024. 270 to win. Vice President Harris has 112 Electoral College votes, 198 for former President Donald Trump. You know, the Florida Senate race was on every Floridian's ballot this time around.
Republican incumbent Rick Scott is looking for re-election. He was up against Democrat Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, taking a large lead and calling the race for Rick Scott. Both of them coming out and speaking already tonight. We find News4JAX reporter Ann Maxwell in Bonita Springs, where Rick Scott's camp is.
Joy, Troy. Good evening. It's still an upbeat party atmosphere here at the watch celebration for Senator Rick Scott. He's going to be heading to Washington for another 6-year term. This, of course, comes after he spent 2 terms as governor of the Sunshine State. He ran on a platform this time of Rescue America. He pitched voters on making America more like Florida, more fiscally conservative. He also focused on his platform on issues that have been at the center of culture war issues in recent years, such as education, gender, and abortion. However, he did hint in his acceptance speech here tonight that this race is not the ceiling of his ambition. He said that the election for Senate Republican leader is next week. He noted that he challenged Mitch McConnell for that role 2 years ago. He said because he believes there needs to be a change. Take a listen.
We need the Republican Party to start solving the problems of this country, and we have a significant number of problems. Florida is the center of the Republican Party of this country. Washington can learn a hell of a lot from what we've done right here in this great state.
The senator thanked his family and his supporters in his speech here tonight, and he ended his remarks by saying, "Let's get to work." Reporting live from Bonita Springs and Maxwell, Channel 4, the local station.
All righty, and thank you. Now we're going to head out to News4JAX reporter Tiffany Salome in the Miami area tonight.
Yeah, Tiffany, what are those at the Debbie Mucarsel Powell camp feeling this evening? She already spoke to her supporters.
Yeah, you know, there's not a lot going on here right now. The feeling really was hopefulness for the future. And of course, in her concession speech, Debbie Mucarsel Powell talked about wanting to work for Florida. She said she's not done. She did thank her supporters and the millions of Floridians that showed up to vote today. But she talked a lot about wanting to make a change in that she hinted that she would come back in some way. Of course, she was seeking an upset vote that would have gave her party a razor-thin control that they have of the chamber. Again, things wrapped up pretty quickly here, so it's a much different story than the Rick Scott campaign over in Bonita Springs. For now, we're live in Miami. Tiffany Salome, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate your live reporting tonight.
All right, stay with us. We're going to take a short little break. We will be back. We've got a roundtable and other reporters throughout the state. We will be back with Vote 2024 election night.
process, get out in person to vote, and you've seen some big shifts. Now, one question has been, of course, are you simply shuffling the deck, or are you actually getting to those low propensity voters? But it is not a winning strategy to try to get a low propensity voter to turn out on one day. If that's your target, then early voting is the way to go. And when you're contrasting what happened to 2020 versus now, I think one of the differences will be early voting. Another difference is that migration that I mentioned earlier, the migration from blue states to red states, and increased Republican registrations that you've seen in North Carolina and in Pennsylvania, and by the way, in Arizona and Nevada. And with small margins, those could be significant. And so those are a couple things to keep an eye on, but John's point is really well taken.
So we're going to run out of time for our roundtable right now. I know, Chris, you said, hey, it's about time we start talking about Arizona. We're going to keep looking at some of these battleground states as well. For right now, we're going to take a short break. Stay with us on our election night coverage here in Vote 2024. A few more states out west will be called, including California. Let's take a quick look at that Electoral College map. We are still waiting for quite a few swing states as Donald Trump has 210 electoral votes to Harris's 112. Gentlemen, call out very quickly, what are the paths we are looking for? We have like 30 seconds left.
For Kamala Harris, blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, added to Nebraska, gets her to 270.
Okay, and for Donald Trump?
North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania gets you to 270 if you're Donald Trump.
And how are we looking?
For now, Donald Trump is leading in all three of those states. And in the big blue wall, it is very, by the way, they call it a blue wall for a reason. It is Democratic. And in the last 30 years, in the last late elections, only gone Republican one time.
And that's it for the 10 o'clock news.
Stick with us. We're back after this break.